Anything else we need to know, Jerry?
Nope, just get ready to go. Here we go. We now continue with part 3 of Nigey Lennon and Bob Dobbs.
Okay, Nigey, you have a statement on page 51. Frank had developed a beautiful and highly unusual harmonic sense both chordally and in the melodic patterns he soloed on. But the most important element in his playing was always rhythm. Now I remember I have in my files an interview with Frank in the New York Times, perhaps the first one. I think it was even before the Garrett Theater, let's say in the fall of '66 when he was in New York. And the quote goes something like, he plays, several people do instruments, and he plays drums, but we don't know who the drummer is. It's a very interesting statement, but it showed the importance of the drumming in Frank and how he used it as a metaphor, and he also used the metaphor of the plumber, I think, in there. Now we could qualify it with the exact quote if we got to the files later, but this thing, Frank was a drummer as a musician first.
That was
right?
That was his first instrument. Well, his first instrument, if you call it an instrument, is orchestra percussion. Starting when he was probably like 14 or 15, he started playing snare drum, and from there he graduated. I think he got into the whole battery of orchestra percussion. He wasn't much of a timpani player, as I recall, but anyway, from there he played in high school ensembles and things. But then he kind of discovered rhythm and blues in kind of his moving more towards his later teens, and started playing in R&B groups. So.
And then that got him into the guitar?
The guitar thing, yeah. He was listening to rhythm and blues records. He was playing drums in these bands. The bands he played in were real primitive affairs. I don't think they understood what he was trying to do on the drums at all. In fact, he got fired from his first gig for playing the cymbal too much.
Right.
You know, that whole story is funny. But, so he basically had been listening to these records, and the thing he liked the most about them, he realized, was the sound of the guitar. If you listen to stuff recorded in the mid-50s, specifically the stuff he listened to, Guitar Slim, Gatemouth Brown, and of course Johnny Guitar Watson, all of those guys were pushing the envelope as far as electric guitar went. Charlie Christian had kind of pioneered a certain sound with a primitive pickup, like a D. Armand pickup on an acoustic instrument, that there wasn't much danger of it ever, there wasn't enough power for it to distort. If it did distort, they would stop right away and do another take. It wasn't an intentional effect. Guitar Slim, on the other hand, on his first big single, The Story of My Life, if you listen to that, he's deliberately distorting that instrument, and it's a really interesting sound. In fact, you can hear from that one record, you can hear where Frank's guitar style subsequently, what it evolved from.
And what year was that record?
55, or 56 maybe, but right in there. And it's just a really interesting thing. And Frank was hearing stuff like this, and his first thought was, well, none of these guys get to take very long solos. I'd like to do this, but I'd like to do it for 20 minutes.
Right. Now, did he tell you that, or that's just your insight?
Well, a little of both. We talked quite a bit about it, because I was curious as a guitar player, where that style came from, because I kind of had
his style came
from.
And he did say, I want to do it longer.
Yeah, that was exactly what he said. I wanted those things to go on for 20 minutes. They were good for a minute and a half.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Because he just loved to listen to it so much.
Actually, that is really why I love Frank, is that he would go longer.
Yeah.
Because he loved that. I love that music and the
Yeah.
originals, and then he would go longer. That was amazing. I'm glad that he did that.
Yeah.
so you were curious about why he did it longer?
Well, he didn't go first, but he did it longer. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. He went first. But Nigey made him admit it.
But he definitely.
You want to know why he went longer?
What it was exactly about that style of music that he loved so much, why he liked that guitar sound. And what he told me was, well, at that point in my life, and he was, middle teens and a little later, he was just angry at the world. He was just pissed off. And the first time
he knew that about himself. He said that.
Oh, he knew it. And he said that when he heard this music, at first he didn't understand it because it just was so strange sounding. And then he realized, well, wait a minute. Like he heard Guitar Slim, A Story of My Life. He's like playing that instrument like he wants to tear it to pieces. Why is this? And then the more he realizes, well, there's an angry spirit in this music that it was, for him, it was liberating energy. And
that's interesting because he was coming out of a little classical
Yeah, a
white
really
man tradition.
structured, yeah,
Yeah,
white people's
with
music.
in his 13, 14, 15,
Right.
and that's even before Varese. Did Varese get him into that?
No, Varese was the beginning for him.
Yeah, so
The
here's
music.
this very abstract,
Right.
left
right.
hemisphere kind of
Right,
music,
right.
And then he, a year or two later, here's this raunchy right hemisphere
Mhm.
dog energy,
Dog
right?
again, yeah.
And he actually
Yeah.
didn't understand it for
Well,
a
at
bit.
first, when he heard that guitar stuff, he couldn't figure out, well, what is he doing to, he's thinking, what is Guitar Slim doing to that instrument and why?
Yeah, that's rather rude. That's
You know,
a disrespectful
You
playing or
wouldn't
something.
do that to a violin now, would you? But it's
Yeah,
not
right.
a violin. So, and then when it, I think it just sort of was. I don't think he went through a big intellectualizing process.
Yeah.
It just he felt it at the time.
And he said
Yeah.
it was like alien to him, but then he said, "Well, I'm going to do it," and he realized that because I'm angry.
Yeah.
I'm angry.
Yeah, he was
I wanna-
angry. You see, you understand too that at that point in his life, the other big interest in his life was chemistry, was
Yeah.
blowing things up. That's
Yeah.
what he put it. He said, I spent my whole teenage years blowing things up. And what he would do, obviously, was like he'd make homemade concoctions that were explosive. He didn't have enough money to put together like a good nitroglycerin charge, so he would take gunpowder. He'd like get old caps, blasting caps, or single shot caps typically. I say it now. I identified with that because when I was in Arizona, that sort of period, my family's from Arizona, and I would spend summer vacations there a lot, and my family was in the cattle ranching business. I got into rodeo. One of the things I loved to do was go out. There were a lot of mining companies in southeastern Arizona where my family was from. I'd find old, unfired dynamite charges or old blasting caps, and I'd take them apart and hit them with a hammer.
and they blow up.
Boom! Boy, was that satisfying.
So you did the same
I
thing.
did the same thing.
Jeez.
When Frank said, I used to love to blow things up, I got this look in my said, and you did.
Yeah. no wonder you got sick the
Yeah.
same time he did.
Yeah.
You guys were on some kind of
Something.
spiraling
Something.
conic
I've
section.
had people, this is a little bit of an aside, but there are people who've accused me in the book of sounding too much like Frank. I said, well, I've done a good job then, haven't I?
No, but you knew the jargon.
Yeah.
You knew the language that the musicians
Mhm.
talk, right?
Sure, but what my point with the book too, the reason it's called Being Frank is I wanted to
Right.
get it from the inside out as well as from the outside in.
You merged. It was like a
tried to.
cult. You merged with the cult language and style,
Right,
the
right.
jargon,
Mhm.
and Frank admits that his songs are about in jokes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the Dr. Zircon
I'm trying to
stuff.
describe what the source of those
Yeah.
songs were. In a sense, it's kind of like what Ben Watson tried to do with the Poodle book. He's talking about it from the standpoint of studying it and looking at it as sort of removed references to things and following up those clips. But for me, it's like, here's what it was like being on the inside, and here's what some of those things, meant. But anyway, the thing with Frank, getting back to his musical sources, he got into playing this style of guitar that never changed.
Yeah.
From 1958, when he really got into it heavily, to the last time
he
he played
actually-
was 30 years later, 80.
Yeah, I would say that Frank was the real Elvis of amplified electrified
As far as
music.
that goes,
Yeah,
because
he
did
invented. He was the first. I mean, I don't know if Mick Jagger or Keith Richards were doing it in '56, but he was the founder of rock.
in that sense,
And
absolutely.
as it later became
Mhm.
the blues, the black crossover, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that influence.
There were. I'm trying to think. There may have been. You may be right because he played like that from the beginning when he was playing in
Yeah.
R&B bands in the Antelope Valley and in San Diego.
I mean, if John
Yeah.
Lennon listened to that stuff, I'm
Mhm.
not sure if he did. I think Jagger and Brian
Mhm.
Jones did. But if John Lennon listened to in '56, '57, he certainly didn't play
Play
like
it.
that
No.
for years.
Yeah.
If you
Well,
ever-
it was a unique situation too, where Frank had a real ability as a guitar player. That was his instrument. He may have.
No, that's what we're talking about. He only discovered that after he heard the R&B record, so
Right.
that got him out of the percussion drumming.
Sure. Yeah, because otherwise he might have gone on and been a drone in community orchestras for the rest of his life and wondered why he kind of felt suicidal or like blowing things up.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's so
Yeah.
beautiful in that document, the A&E biography. The end has
Mhm.
him hugging Johnny Guitar
Oh, yeah,
Watson.
yeah.
That's the beginning
Yeah.
end. Maybe they probably meant that, but that is
Yeah.
the thing, eh?
no. He really did love those guys.
And it was the beginning end. He's hugging before he
The
dies. He's
beginning.
hugging the guy that really got him going.
Yeah, that was neat. I liked that.
And it's a passing on.
Of a tradition.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, that was the thing. Maybe the thing I cherished the most about Frank as a mentor for me was that I lacked a connection very much to anything organic like that. I mean, I had the Western connection, which came from my family, but
Organic meaning people? I don't know
Just-
what you mean.
feeling that you've inherited a tradition that is
Oh, so
rooted
Frank was the tradition, you mean?
in that
Right,
sense,
yeah.
because his love of R&B went so far beyond any kind of cynicism or sneering or
That's where his
jokes.
love was.
There was love there,
Yeah.
and it was really profound. I mean, you just had to listen to him. It was great to listen to classical music with him because he loved that too, but it was much more cerebral.
Yeah.
But I saw a side of Frank when he listened to R&B, which admittedly I only listened with him a very few times to it, but the stuff he played for me, because he wanted me to hear certain guitar things, you know, for my own benefit. But watching him listen to that stuff.
Watch his face glow, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you know, his face was—he's a funny-looking person. We all know that about him.
He's handsome and funny at the same time.
Yeah, right. But when he listened to that music and it was lit from that, you know, by that internal flame, really, it was just beautiful.
I mean, his face looked. That's where the handsome Frank come out. Or
yeah, it was, and it wasn't really anything to do with his external appearance, his physical features. It was something inside.
The beauty inside.
Yeah, which is the thing I saw when I first met him. That first meeting of Bizarre Records, I saw that too.
Now that's what you actually were seeing. What Don and Frank shared together when they were in high school, that they're glowing together.
It was kind of like this little sort of conspiratorial here, so we can go listen to these records in this back room, and they can't get us, you know.
And then you saw the secret body chemistry exchange among people who genuinely loved it with Frank while listening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now there's one little side thing. It just reminded me. In my interview, when we were talking about whether he used a condom with his first girlfriend, what happened is the parents got wind of the two of them.
Right.
He's about 15 or 16.
That's in the book. I have that in the book, that story.
You do?
Yeah.
And they moved away?
His girlfriend, absolutely. Yeah. I don't have that part of it in it, but I have the rest of it up to that point.
Right. In other words, mine, I can't remember where I got. I'm assuming, didn't I get into the interview that the parents moved
Well, that
away?
was what Frank told me, so if he...
But it's not in the book.
It's not in the book. No.
Right, so I only would know through my own interview.
Right, but it's the same story.
Now that is the anger root.
Right.
His first love relationship got aborted.
Fuck you. Yeah.
Yeah, the parent, the family, the Americans took away from the Italian.
White, you know. Yeah. Right. Exactly. You know, he was. Yeah. It was funny because in the book I described, it was during our time on the road. I just was really curious. The more I began to sense, again, it was all sense, nothing logical about it, that this all kind of, for him, everything went back to some experience. One experience, we had to pin everything on it, that made him just so anxious, not anxious, but so reluctant to reveal or to let people come too close. Because,
so you,
and I asked
you should put it, if you do this book again, finish the story.
I should.
They took, because that's the key event. And then
he didn't really, it took me a while to draw that out of him. He didn't say, I have it as a conversation there. And it's true to the actual conversation. He said it was pretty rancid.
Yeah.
That's the way he ended it.
But you don't have all the details in it.
And but it was, his parents caught them in the act. Yeah. And telegraphed it to her parents.
Oh, his parents. Oh, so his parents caught them. Maybe have caused the parents to move?
Yeah. And then his folks talked to her folks.
And
they moved. The other family.
Yeah, you think the family, they would have agreed? It wasn't, that's happening. You don't have to persuade us to move. We'll move. Or did the Zappa family say, get out of here?
Well, no, I don't think it was like that. I think the other people said, well, we don't want our nice, clean, virginal daughter messing around with this sleaze bucket. We got to get her out of the vicinity. That was the way Frank seemed to think it had happened. Yeah.
Now, parallel thing. Jerry found a quote a few years ago, where Frank, and he asked me what I thought of it. I remember the quote. I think I even have it sitting around here. It always shows up, Jerry, where he said in one interview that he believes we should take love for granted and not have to talk about it. If you're in love, you don't have to talk about it. Remember that concept?
I can believe,
And that's a good spiritual idea. You just take it. You have a trusting with humans.
That's not what he meant.
But it's coming out of, I don't want to talk about the original wound. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he didn't, because to him, in all fairness, too, the other side of him, I think he could feel it. I mean, I got a sense from him. I mean, as much as I said earlier that I didn't think we had a conventional love type. It wasn't conventional, but even a love type relationship. And that's not true, because I felt love from him on a number of occasions, and it was real interesting because it was very intense, but it wasn't specific. It isn't like, I mean, once in a while, like when he's keeping his eye on me, making sure I didn't, make eyes at anybody in the band or anything like that, I felt like he was like the big brother, the overly protective, squeeze you till you, squeal kind of thing. But mostly he didn't really hang on too hard to anything that he really liked a lot. He gave it a lot of space because he's afraid he's going to lose it. And I think that's at the
that's what the documentary says. Don't expect anything light. Don't trust anybody. Don't expect anything. And if you get something, it's a little bonus.
Right. He used to have I've adopted it, actually, one of his favorite sayings. What was it? Never expect the worst. You'll always be pleasantly surprised.
Right.
That was it, yeah.
In other words, a lot of these things we catch in interviews done in the late 70s, early 80s, he said all that to you over those years.
Yeah.
You heard all of those things.
Yeah, we talked a lot because, you tired out, right? You've done a show or something, you can't get to sleep. You have sex, you smoke a couple of cigarettes, and you're sitting there kind of staring at the ceiling. Well, you have to do something.
Yeah.
And,
you remind me so much of my adopted daughter, foster daughter, because Carolyn, my wife, and I were unique. And she was just a young girl who, when she was 16, got involved with us. and she spent most of the time trying to comprehend us. And
Mm.
like that's what happened to you. You were with this amazing person, and your
Mm-hmm.
little kid who says, "Geez, what? Tell me all about you." So actually, you got
Yeah.
I mean, Don Preston didn't ask Frank questions. They
No.
already knew each other.
Yeah.
You were like from another world, and said, "Oh," and so you found out a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
And he would.
I
Tell,
wouldn't let him not talk. See, I would
Yeah.
keep drawing him out and keep drawing him out.
But you were generally puzzled.
Yeah.
Like, what's
yeah.
going on here?
Yeah. What is this guy?
Yeah. Okay, now that might come to this next point. His old Zappa's old earthiness was still apparent. Oh, this is when, which Phil took.
Oh, the last.
Oh, the sick
the old
photos. Yeah. So you're looking at the sick Frank. His old earthiness was still apparent, but now it seemed tempered with a depth and complexity reminiscent of a portrait of a Renaissance philosopher. Dr. Zircon had merged into Falconelli.
Falconelli, yeah.
Now, years ago, we looked into who Falconelli was.
Right.
There wasn't too much talk about him, I don't think, in the Barry Miles articles. That was something that came out later.
Yeah, Frank kind of discovered him.
Right, but did he know about Falconelli when you were with him?
He mentioned him, just very much in passing on a couple of, when I was reading the Boccaccio, the Decameron stuff. And he says that's really kind of, what the gist of it was, as I recall, was that it was sort of, Falconelli was kind of his whole take on Renaissance philosophers, Italian philosophers.
Right, the alchemist.
Yeah, the alchemist.
Yeah, now there's the book.
And that, of course, Varese got into alchemy a lot with his work, so I think Frank probably related to
And
it.
that's where Jari and the Symbolist retrieval of the alchemy thing.
Yeah.
But Frank, he didn't seem to want to go into it or talk. Do you think he
Well,
studied Falconelli?
He probably knew something about it, and it's true. Alchemy, you're not supposed to discuss it with people who don't understand.
Right. So he never told you the secrets of
no,
whatever alchemical concepts.
He did say he was an alchemist, and
Yeah.
he did say that it was something, a person that he found real interesting. As far as those old guys who are kind of boring, he was a guy who sounded like he could blow things up.
That's a direct quote.
That was Frank. Yeah.
Well, so Falconelli, he's talked about in the book The Morning of the Magicians, which came out about 69, 70 or something.
Right.
Was that book in Frank's library?
I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah.
But it's possible he read it. Yeah, and the other thing is on the tour, he's reading a lot of Aleister Crowley.
You see, in Miles's articles in Crawdaddy 69, 70, in that period, he stayed at Frank's. This would be 69, 70, just before you met him. I think I remember he said Frank was working on Egyptian hieroglyphs. Or Egyptian
yeah,
Book
he was
of the
real
Dead.
interested in Egyptian stuff.
In the Egyptian Book of the Dead?
Yeah, not so much the Book of the Dead. He had an old book, which I think was, if it wasn't Bulwer Lytton, it might have been Richard Burton. It was an original edition, about 1885, I would say, 1890. It was actually like a second edition, I would think, because it was probably 1850s, but it was The Key to the Afterlife. It was a translation of an old papyrus, and Frank has talked about this subsequently in interviews, a few times at least.
In my thing, he goes into the Egyptian stuff, but he just talks about the curious thing, how they had to have names for
that
everything.
Was what, that's what this book was.
But it wasn't like he thought it was curious. He doesn't talk as an alchemist about it.
No. But what he does and he doesn't, it's kind of metaphysical. The way, at least he talked about it to me, was he sort of said, well, these guys, in other words, if you wanted to pass through into the afterlife, you had to know the name of everything.
Yeah, step by step.
Mr. Detail, he's, and he was just, like he said, he was just shitting himself. If that's really true, then God forbid. He's like shaking his head.
Well, in other words,
it was funny because
his detailed kind of
the way his
temperament,
mind worked. Yeah.
He was a detailed guy, but he thought that was putting detail in the wrong area.
Too much detail in the wrong area.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. See, and he, as a detail freak, he could appreciate it.
Yeah.
He was
But he
talking to
said
himself.
that's perverse.
That's bad news.
Would he say that's really blowing things up? Or would that be the opposite of blowing
that
things up?
wouldn't be blowing things up.
That'd be the opposite.
That'd be the opposite, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Macro and micro,
That'd be the Pat Robertson. The Pat Robertson syndrome.
Right. It's like, orthodoxy.
Yeah,
that would be orthodoxy. Yeah.
All right, so where I was leading with that was, he does not say in that article that he was reading Crowley, just Egyptian, I don't think. But it was, David Wally told me when I was 71 and 72, when I was talking to him, he said, well, Frank, he was putting down Frank, he put it down, Frank's reading Aleister Crowley now, like black magic, he really didn't like it.
That's
now,
funny.
we don't have much more on that. I just knew about that. Then, what did you see? Did he talk to you about Crowley?
He didn't talk to me about it at all, but there was like on the nightstand or, wherever he sort of put up, camped out for a while, there would be on the nightstand various Crowley books. Like, Crowley wrote a lot of fiction, like dirty novels.
Wait, you say nightstand. Did he sleep down there where you were?
Oh, no, on the road. This was when we were in motels.
What's
on
the
nightstand.
Oh, on the table.
Like next to the,
the reading.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The light, there's like, usually like 6 packs of cigarettes, empty, right? Old styrofoam coffee cup, half empty. big pile of books. You know, people give him things a lot,
Yeah.
and then on the top was like this well-thumbed Crowley, whatever. You know.
Whichever one it was.
He would like read what his favorite was tended to be the fiction stuff because it's dirty.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of real smut in it, and he was like, he'd read me a passage once in a while when he got a really good one. He'd say, "Now, what do you think of that?" And I'd say, "Well, it sounds kind of perverse to me," and he'd just kind of chuckle, you know.
Do you talk about this in the book? I can't remember. Do you
A little
mention
bit
Crowley?
about how we talked about. I mentioned because oddly enough, yeah, I do in one context because Ms. Moviola gave him one of the smutty novels.
Right,
because
now
she knew that's what he
that was a
reading.
mystery. I forgot
Yeah.
there's another mystery
Right.
because I knew Wally. Who turned him on to Crowley? You think it was Miss Moviola?
I don't think so. I think he discovered Crowley himself somehow. You know, Frank was perfectly capable of finding books on
That's
his own.
right.
And he read a lot more than he ever.
Than the image, yeah.
He's ashamed.
Now the
One of the funniest things I got to say real quick was he read me. He liked Burroughs a lot.
yeah.
And one of the funniest things that I ever experienced of him reading me something in its entirety was the Talking Asshole from
Yeah.
Naked Lunch, which he later recorded. I only heard it much
78.
later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but in person it was hilarious because he would mime all of the actions, like you were describing him walking with his tight butt.
Yeah. After the.
But he would like walk around and read it. I mean, he almost had it committed to memory.
Yeah, that tight
Yeah.
asshole.
The-
Did he
the
know that he looked
talking
like
asshole.
a talking ass?
I
Did he
think
know?
he maybe on some level.
Did he know that he looked like that when he walked like
Yeah,
that?
I don't know.
Isn't that funny? Yeah,
Yeah,
good point.
yeah.
So he would act out, walk around with the tight asshole from your point of view.
Right.
When he did the talking
reading,
asshole.
yeah, reading or remembering it from.
Maybe it's because it's the pomposity of it,
Yeah.
and so he would put it on, and it would bring up something he actually had in himself.
Yeah.
So he was the perfect person to do that. thing.
Everything that Frank, I think, any material from elsewhere that he took and made his own, he had to feel it first. Whether we're talking about
It had to
it
become.
affect him somehow.
Yeah.
And then he'd internalize it and spew it back out in another form. But
Right.
he had to feel it. And that's you look at all his influences, and I think that's true of all of them. Yeah.
So he would be the perfect person to act out reading the talking asshole
yeah.
because he could
Oh,
really
God,
hype
it was
it.
funny. I mean, it was just so funny.
And that's one of the things you'd be laughing at,
Yeah.
falling on the ground and
Yeah.
wetting your pants. And
Yeah,
all that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, he was the funniest person I've ever known. It's just he wasn't funny in any conventional. He was funny the way a Martian would probably be funny if you weren't quite sure
You know,
why
be
you were
serious.
laughing.
You had to be watch your toe the line, do your job, be
Right,
disciplined.
right.
But every now and then he'd let go and
No,
he'd
man, when he
just
went, he
relax.
went. Yeah.
He'd be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
that
he also,
that
yeah, go ahead.
I noticed, in the little interviews where he would break up, you would really see the manic. I would say
Oh,
not
yeah.
it's dog mental comic energy. He really could be funny. He'd get you laughing when you
Yeah.
start improvising.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
what I mean?
You God, yeah.
Yeah, he really had that ability.
Well, his laugh. Do you remember his laugh?
Well, those different ones I remember. You
There
mean
was
on
a-
record or
Just
in movies?
when you interviewed him.
How about the one in Uncle Meat? There's a
Oh,
strange
that's
laugh.
a weird laugh.
That's an
Yeah, yeah.
aggressive. What is it?
Yeah.
And somebody tells him a story, and Frank is
It's like
out evil. Yeah, he's laughing at the guy. He's
You're
like,
right.
he's
Yeah.
sadistic.
Yeah.
Okay, there's
Yeah.
that laugh. Is there other laughs?
Well, he's got when he was like really when he really laughed deeply, it was like someone had caught him unawares, and he had sort of momentarily lost control, and it was like a spasm. It was like a really profound kind of thing, but it was a little puzzling to him. He wasn't sure if he wanted this to continue.
Right,
And he kind of
right.
pulled back on it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he'd get,
You would see it in his face,
yeah.
his aura, but you'd see him controlling it
Yeah, he'd
as
pull
it
it
went.
back, yeah.
In other words, it would pop out and he'd draw it back in.
Do you remember the on the Roxy at the Roxy performance? Did you see that? You probably weren't in LA then, but
No,
it's
not
on
to-
the a truncated version of it's on the album release, and he's describing in cheapness how he used to really crack up because he would see these slips, the Deus Ex Machina, in these cheap sci-fi films, like like the one thing where the monster came out. Oh, there's your monster coming out.
Right.
The thing from the
Yeah.
Olympic Auditorium.
And you see them beating the
You
stick.
see the guy, he's like,
Back,
oh
back.
no, and he's pulling it back, the
Yeah,
2x4. And I think that to Frank was like very symbolic.
Yeah, that's an
You know?
interesting concept because
Um,
he's laughing at the revealing of the props, the stage.
Yeah,
But Frank often would reveal the props.
maybe it was a way for him to come to terms with things he was a perfectionist. There's no two ways
Yeah.
about it, and he was very detail oriented, and sometimes maybe he was trying to laugh at himself. And try and relax as much as he could, but that's why I'm saying there's a lot of chinks in the armor.
In other words, he was literally crazy. This guy was.
Oh
crazy.
yeah, definitely.
There was
And
contradictions that.
that he didn't give a shit about, but they were there.
Yeah. It was interesting. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's interesting what he was perfectionist about and how he
Mhm.
let other things ride.
Right.
Why was he perfectionist about that and
Large
not this?
issues in his life could all go to hell. Well, he was tweaking the EQ on that, channel 26 over here.
There's where he was the alchemist. He was
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
the monk
Yeah.
off into the
Yeah.
he didn't get a hell of a humanity. He was
That was what he liked to think about the Decameron, because there's a lot of things about mad, crazed clerics in there, and priests having strange affairs with. And I don't think he ever really. I mean, being Catholic, you grew up in that environment, and I'm sure he had his doubts about the church. I mean, he gave up on that relatively early, but I think reading about what they were really like in those days was an eye opener for him.
So yeah, what's interesting about Frank is that it's in the line, the present-day composer refuses to die.
Yeah.
In the Electric, McLuhan goes a lot into this. He's the expert on explaining why cultural specialties are obsolete. By 1960, say.
Entropy.
Now Frank was Beethoven, Mozart, the greats reincarnated in an age that it was totally ridiculous to be what he was.
Yeah.
And so he knew that, and so he would go back. He'd have that medieval thing that I'm a freak of my time.
That's right.
Just because I'm a genius. We don't need geniuses.
We don't need
anymore.
geniuses.
Yeah.
My point is, I make somewhat of the same point in the book. I say, that he was an anti-intellectual born into, the I era in the 50s, born in the 40s. But
he was an intellectual, forced to be,
but
who couldn't handle the mundane intellectuality.
Right.
He was a genuine intellectual. He was a genuine.
No, he really
mind.
was. Yeah, he was. And here he was in the middle of the 50s, and he was kind of like the Fly. Help me!
Yeah. You reincarnated in the wrong time zone.
Yeah. It really is.
So did we finish the Crowley thing? So I want to say about Crowley it was right then in 69, 70 that a Crowley upsurge happened.
Right.
It was you could say it was like American pop. The counterculture went into a dark side after Manson, and the kids were frustrated, so they started to get into an evil thing, and that's when Robert Anton Wilson discovered Crowley, and so Frank and Wilson both were into Crowley. Now Frank, that never came up in his work really. The Crowley thing, was that just a passing thing?
Well, I mean, in the sense that he read Crowley probably for a period of a year and then probably didn't anymore. But
and he never wrote a song about it. He gave it up, it seems.
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, maybe it was so intrinsic to his work, the alchemy angle, which is, I think, pretty valid.
Yeah, maybe it's just on the alchemy level. In other words, he read about a modern alchemist, so to speak, and then he just said, "Oh, well, I know what I'll do with that."
I have been fascinated with Zen.
Tell me a bit about his Zen. He never went to a Zen monastery.
No, he never did that.
He just read. Who did he read? Alan Watts?
He'd read Alan Watts. He'd read, all of the Japanese Zen masters and all the translations he could get his hands. He read
when he was 18.
Yeah, when he was like really young.
Yeah.
Right.
Now here's a little thing. One time Jerry mentioned something to Gail in the kitchen, and you mentioned Watts. Jerry said, "I like Alan Watts." She said, "Oh, that's one of those Leary guys." Now that's interesting. She didn't know that Frank, so you've just exposed that Frank was influenced by Watts. Here's Gail is not interested in Watts. What do you think of that, Jerry? Can you supplement that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, that's curious, right? That you would think, when I got that image from Gail, when Jerry mentioned it, I thought, oh, Frank, he's always been the counterculture. Maybe he didn't like the Watts in that, but he was Zen, so what is? But you filled into him. You're sure he read Watts?
Oh yeah, he definitely he mentioned Watts and Zen Flesh, Zen Bones and books like that.
Yeah, you see how big of influence the Cage and Watts had in the 50s on the young beatniks.
Absolutely, he was really. In fact, he flip-flopped too because he was really big about Cage for a long time, and then he kind of.
When you knew him.
Yeah.
See, you knew him right when.
It was real pivotal.
Yeah, and you got all the past references. He was deciding where to go. And then he got knocked down.
Well, that's what happened.
Yeah, he got kicked out.
Yeah.
And then he became a different situation.
Yeah.
But that's you're the it's like what do you call it, the repository of him working out.
Yeah.
What he was going to drop and not acknowledge anymore, and what he was maybe going to acknowledge.
Sure.
That's interesting.
Was interesting. So I was trying to get him to tell me about Zen because I sensed he embodied it in a lot.
And you hadn't read, you didn't know much about it.
Not too much, really.
You hadn't read anything.
Yeah, I'd read a little bit of Alan Watts, myself.
Oh, okay. So you knew.
Yeah, I knew the precepts of it, but I was really green. I was fumbling towards something, and Frank, I noticed, did not want to discuss it.
You would press him.
Because he was really Zen himself. You can't discuss it. It has to be experienced and understood, and he didn't want to talk about it. So
maybe because he
didn't trust himself. Maybe
I would say when he read Zen, he realized that's what he was.
Yeah.
So he didn't have to learn it. He said, "Oh, that's me.
That's me."
I don't be a Catholic. So and so therefore maybe it was too. It was he wouldn't discuss it because it was obvious, and you did pick it up. He said, "Look, you are Zen, Frank."
Yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
Talk about it. He says, "Well, it's hard to talk about myself."
So what can I say?
Yeah. Well, it's just watch me.
Yeah. Got a cigarette?
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah.
Okay, so the Watts, the Zen thing. So you never got anything out of him on the Zen
but
stuff.
I did. He did mention that he read a lot about it. That was as far as he went.
Yeah, because the 1975. I'm just thinking. In the Village Voice, when Frank would come to New York, they'd say Frank is the right-wing faction of rock.
Yeah, sure.
Now, here's what's interesting. He satirized Leary. He once said in '69 that he'd rather have Ronald Reagan be president than Leary. Now, we can't necessarily lump Watts in with Leary, but a lot of the counterculture, the intelligent counterculture like Watts and those guys, Frank always seemed to be contrary to them. So you're telling us that he actually was influencing them, but for some reason he didn't want to be part of it in the late 60s, early 70s. He didn't want to show his image in relation to that.
Yeah, probably to a certain extent. I mean, if somebody like yourself had interviewed him at that point and asked him some of these questions, and he sensed that you were coming at it from an honest place, he would have told you.
Yeah, and maybe that's why this interview was good.
Absolutely, because he sensed somebody was open, and then he was okay.
Yeah,
he really did pick up on that. But so much of you've read interviews with him that were conducted at that time, they are so stupid. A lot of them. I mean, people just had such preconceived notions about what he was and what where they were the approach they were taking to the whole thing.
Well, that's why I think he was a real artist. He was an invisible environment. They couldn't perceive the present that he was manifesting. Because every time I saw a Zappa concert, I said, "This is a bloody UFO in front of us. This is an amazing orchestra."
Yeah.
It's like Slimsky says, everything Frank did was an opera. It was. It was big. It was so it made everything else look so puny.
You know what I mean? Along those lines, Frank.
And you get little teenagers running these, popping. They can't even hear it, and they're going,
see a little piece of it,
what did you name your kid? That's all I can hear.
Right, exactly. There's some people that ask me today,
today in general.
Well, yeah, these are the people some of them on the net, not everybody on the net.
Oh, today? Was it today?
Yeah, well, not today. Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, I just heard from my friend in Chicago. Someone else is maligning me on the net today, and he was like, saying, "What an idiot," But these are the same people today that misunderstand, I think, who Frank was.
Yeah.
They don't,
Well, they can't perceive it. They're not intelligent, mature, or grown up, whatever is required.
They don't understand that a multidimensional person, has to be taken, on a lot of different levels. That's all. But I was going to tell a funny story about Wagner. You see, it's true, like what Slimsky said about opera. What I would look at it is Frank. One time when we were listening to music when I was up there, he put on some Wagner. I think it might have been from Tannhauser, maybe. I'm not that familiar with Wagner. Just never really was too hot for his stuff. But Frank played this, and then he kind of looked at me with that kind of look, like, don't laugh at this, because he knew Wagner was not very defensible. He says, "Yeah, okay, I admit it, I like Wagner."
That was the look. He never said it.
He kind of said it. Yeah.
Do you have that in here?
Yeah. How he admitted he liked Wagner's music. Yeah.
But you're giving the details a little more here.
And I mean, the book is kind of elliptical in some ways because it would have been a big, thick book.
Yeah, you had too much to say.
There was so much. Yeah, I had to stop, or I would never have stopped.
Oh, it's good that it's short.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like terseness myself, but but his point was, he says, his point then is, he says, hell, Wagner was just the Emerson, Lake, and Palmer of his day. He just had, a lot better orchestration and a lot worse lighting effects.
And that's what it's a verbatim quote.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what he said.
Now, you mentioned that Frank read a lot in
a funny kind of desultory way.
And the Bongo Fury tour, I got backstage and I got on stage with Frank and Don, and that was on April 25th, 1975.
What venue was it?
It was at Nassau. And I had bought a magazine, I don't know, in Modern something, had an interview with Zappa. I showed it to Marty Pirelli.
No, Pirelli's. Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, let me have that." This is before the concert. And I said, "Get back to me after." Yeah. So then after, we went back to the hotel, hauled in, and I said, "Marty, I want magazine back." He denied that he had it, and wouldn't give it back to me. And that's a whole other issue.
Right. Marty was a character. Yeah. Yes, right. We know that.
In other words, he probably realized it was a good article. "Oh, we need this for our files, Frank files or something."
Yeah.
So I get home at 7 in the morning in the subway, going back to Manhattan, and I pick up. I have to buy another copy. But it starts off saying, Frank had read Gunter Grass, and he named all these characters, all these authors. The image of Frank of that time is he didn't read, he didn't want to talk about it, and I always wondered. I then found out later that Frank did read, but I always wondered if that article was accurate. Did you ever see Gunter Grass and those kind of novels, or was it? He didn't read that much, I would say.
He didn't read. I'll tell you what he didn't read. To me, at least, to my eye, it seemed like he didn't read any modern fiction. the stuff he read was specific in different ways. I mean,
A lot of a German thing, right? The Third Reich, he was interested
oh
in
yeah,
that.
yeah. He was for some reason he got out. He went through a period like that Grand Wazoo time,
Yeah.
where he's just fast to the arms of Krupp and
Yeah.
all of that stuff in the rise.
Well,
of
that would be,
Poland.
see, that's the idea
Yeah.
of the Illuminati and the Grand Wazoo. I think
Mhm.
that's...
yeah, I think so too.
That's the
Yeah.
idea of the... and-
Well, because Uncle Meat toiling in the garage
right.
was sort of like some secret,
it's a
there's an
secret
alchemistic
society.
secret society.
Yeah, and he actually
whatever.
did explain Grand Wazoo when one asked, what did you mean? He said it comes from a local Lancaster little Shriners group.
The Grand Wazoo.
yeah, it was some.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
actually a Shriner.
I believe
card.
it. Yeah, I can believe that.
But you can see the metaphor. There's look at that up there, the Grand Wazoo. you see the metaphor of
Yeah.
because that was when America started pre-Watergate,
Yeah.
but they're starting to look. American thinkers are starting to look at the control in the White House and this and that,
Mhm.
and so Frank would get into that trend of looking at the Illuminati. And
Sure.
there was another thought in there. He talks about the Grand Wazoo. Oh, what was it? Jerry, what is it that lately in his later works he talks about the Illuminati? I don't want to get stalled here on what it was. What was it? Oh yeah, in the Banco, in the transcripts of MRS,
Uh-huh.
he talks about the Banco Ambrosiano.
Mm-hmm.
See,
Well, yeah, because being Sicilian, don't forget, all of the mafia stuff was
Right.
in his childhood. Because his grandparents, who owned a restaurant in the waterfront in Baltimore, were definitely mob. It was a mob restaurant where the mobsters
Yeah.
would go hang out.
they were forced to be.
They had no choice.
Deal
right.
with it, yeah.
Yeah, and so secret societies are not new to him. He's raised with them.
Right,
Yeah.
now here's the thing. The okay, he has a picture of the Vatican on Uncle Meat.
Right,
This is
Uncle
a
Meat's
conceptual
storming the Vatican.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're storming the Vatican.
Right.
And so Frank waited for Vatican information to come out. And that's why he talks about the Bank Ambrosiano, which was the
Yeah.
Vatican Bank.
Right.
And then do you know that he later got very interested in May Brussel, who exposed a lot of that
Mhm.
P2 stuff, or
Right.
was one of the first journalists to,
Right.
to develop it.
Uh-huh.
Frank, I found out when I was at Frank's house in '85. No, I went to Frank's house in March '85, turned him on to May, then he eventually gave May a computer to coordinate a huge archives on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then in '88 we talked about May, and there's a section in this interview that we can't release. We got into the Illuminati Mafia stuff
Uh-huh.
and his own circumstances around,
Mhm.
I won't say,
Yeah.
and that he would not allow me to broadcast or to
Mhm.
transcribe.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
Mike Herb, you mean?
No, it was about.
Not Mike Kerr.
I would say that that Frank was considered a political threat in certain
Yeah,
people
sure.
politically, and they had
Yeah.
to monitor him in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So he talked about some of the details of the. I don't want to say it
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
could go. There's still other Zappas alive, right? You know,
Yeah.
but that level of paranoia Frank was interested in. That was one of the. He said that he read Pynchon. Did
Yeah.
he read
Yeah.
Pynchon?
We talked about Pynchon.
Now that's
he-
before Gravity's Rainbow.
That was-
the
but he
Crying
read-
of Lot.
Yeah, Crying Lot 69.
He read
yeah.
Pynchon then.
He'd read Pynchon, and the other one he liked was V, of course.
Yeah, V, right.
V, yeah, he could almost recite that thing from memory.
Good. Now that
Yeah.
guy, that journalist mentioned
Yeah.
Pynchon.
Yeah,
Now that means that journalist must have got. We're getting close to that. Was facts.
yeah.
I mean,
Somebody-
Frank might have admitted that he wrote those, that read those books. So
Probably.
Pynchon was one of them.
Once again, it was someone like yourself, and it was earnest.
Yeah,
and
so he let it out.
Who cares?
Yeah.
What's there, it's that kind of information in the wrong hands. Frank Zappa's a bookish kind of a guy. He
Yeah.
sits around reading all night. That's the worst thing for him.
Yeah, Frank was very intelligent in controlling his image on
Yeah,
that level, wasn't
sure.
he? Now
He's aware of all the little details. Yeah.
so he was interested in the mafia, and so the Vatican.
You know who else he liked? I just saw a book by him, Philip K. Dick.
Oh, he read,
He liked Dick. Yeah.
and that was Robert
Yeah.
Anton Wilson's buddy.
Yeah, right,
that relationship.
Right. Yeah. So there's some.
So that's not. See,
Mhm.
a student of Frank should note that Frank was interested in conspiracy levels.
Oh yeah,
You know
all
what I
of
mean?
the stuff, the books. Look at the people we've been describing here. Burroughs.
Yeah.
What does he write about control?
Yeah.
Right? To a certain extent, even the Boccaccio thing, which Frank was not familiar with, because he could see control, disease as a metaphor for control. I mean,
Yeah.
there was like certainly that. And a lot of these other people, Crowley, my goodness, I mean, what else did he stand for? And yeah, so I think that was the theme Frank kind of lived for. His whole, going back to his early life, was big things he didn't fully understand, government tentacles and horrible defense things, and the Dr. Zircon myth, and his dad working for the government. Everything to him was this kind of horrible, ominous dread.
That's
and
right. He was
Trying
actually.
to understand what the hell it was.
He lived in a very paranoid
Yeah.
familial situation,
Oh, yeah.
especially
Yeah.
with the Sicilian connection. So,
Yeah.
so that is a key
to understanding
he
him.
understand Frank. And when you think of that early transcript of Uncle Meat,
Mhm.
the one that's
Yeah.
not on the album, where
Yeah,
he's talking about
right.
it, how did the story go? The guy, he has a real crisis about whether to do it or not, or whether he comes home and watches TV and he's trying to decide whether to continue to be part of the government bacteriological thing.
Right.
That is a key metaphor
Yeah.
in Frank. And and I had some good information on AIDS, and it was when we at the end of this interview off the
Mhm.
record, I think,
Mhm.
because it was a 7-hour stretch.
Mhm.
He asked me, "Do you have anything on the book Higher Form of Killing?" And I said, "Yeah, we've got the
Mhm.
book." And he wanted the Xerox, so we faxed it and he put it on the last page
Right.
of his
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Because that is a metaphor. And you think of the plague thing of 30,
Yeah.
40.
Yeah.
Now let's relate this to music
Okay.
as a concept of a. Can there be music? Can there be a new present day composer? And is there some ideas that you've thought of maybe even later? The concept of the big note. Let me just read what he says about the
Okay.
big note, and I want to see what you can say, what you can add to the concept. It was page 22, right, Jerry?
Yep.
Oh yeah, okay. I go. You know, once there's this interview that was done in Canada where he interviewed himself. Did you ever see that footage?
I don't think so.
He pretended he was a journalist imitating himself, and he goes, the first question is something like, "Frank, what do you really want to know?" And he turned, he goes, "What time is it?" And it's like he's asking.
When's this over?
It's a great multi-level thing because it's like, "Oh, that's a question I can't answer. Let's get out of here." You know what I mean? Like, what time is it? Can we get out of here?
Yeah.
There's multi-level, but it also is the total musical percussive question.
Yeah.
What time are we going to play in the Frank?
For him, that was the question of his life.
Right.
What time is it? And
And I have an obscure interview where he it was on a little record magazine where he said, "I'm just decorating time."
Yeah.
But it was a real time thing.
Yeah.
And so we bring that up, and he refers back to it. He goes, "Rate is time." Then he quotes me, "What time is it?" He refers back to one we brought up. I go, "But then you see how that relates to health. Think of disease. Because if you're comfortable and you're satisfying your different rate needs, you probably will be a more energetic, healthy person, or a dog, healthy dog, if you're right. If you got that, I'm thinking more energetic, healthy energy, not in a prissy, Puritan way of a New Age kind of health. They have the energy that he had as a dog energy, which allowed him to burn up all the coffee and cigarettes.
Yeah, right.
It did him in maybe in the end,
Yeah.
but he was able to overcome that just with the power of his energy,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And eat crap food all the time, which is what you used to talk about.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed. You'd read it. How does this guy live like this? You know.
His stomach was a mess. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he still went on for 20 years.
Yeah. He was stoic too. You have to understand that
Yeah.
about him. He was in horrible pain a lot, but you'd never see him wince.
Right. That's where he was a yogi or very
Yeah.
strong person.
He just
So Frank says, "I don't know whether you're going to be more energetic, but I guess in terms of being healthy, see, there's where he qualifies. Good foods don't make you necessarily more energetic, because it's another form of repression. But people talk a lot about stress. See, he really believes stress was the hidden ground. That's a big media thing. Stress is the difference between your calibrated rate and another rate at which you are forced to perform." I go, one size fits all, and that causes stress? And then he says, "I don't think so." Well, if you impose, and then he says, "One size fits all means that the universe is the one size, it fits all." I had projected a dictatorial meaning of one size we all have to fit, but he meant another level.
Right.
One size fits all means the universe is the one size, it fits all. "Oh, I see," I say. "It's not imposed, it adapts to everything." Frank says, "Impose is the wrong word. It exists in the universe, and you can consider the universe an imposition if you're truly arrogant." Which, in a funny way, he was. Truly, the universe.
Kidding, yeah.
the Pope was an imposition, but even the universe. Which gets into Jari and Joyce and how they wanted to be God and outdo God.
Yeah.
Which Frank somehow was trying to do that.
He would have if he'd understood. Yeah, I mean, if because if he hadn't been so Catholic, he never quite broke from a lot of Catholic medieval kind of concepts. Whereas Jari just, steamrolled right over him.
Yeah.
And Joyce as well. Yeah.
Actually, it's another topic. We can go into where Frank failed to do what he attempted.
Yeah.
But at least I'm glad it took a long time for him to fail, because he produced a lot of great music.
It was interesting. Meanwhile,
Yeah. So he says, if you're truly arrogant, you consider the universe a position, or you can,
it's a great quote.
Or you can just deal with it the way it is, which is what he does.
Which is what he does.
Here, it's a universe of rates. You have molecular rates, you have large-scale rates, you have the expansion of the universe rate, you have the rate of atomic decay, you have the rate of aging, you have all these rates. So it's a it's a world of rates, and rates are time. So just so you really understand it, the rate is the difference between when it starts and when it ends.
Right.
That's the rate.
Yeah.
These are cycles.
Right.
Now that brings us back to the big note, and I was really glad he brought that up.
Yeah.
A note is a cycle. A cycle is the way it goes up, the way it goes down. That's one cycle. You know, it's pretty consistent the way I look at stuff. But I seldom do interviews with people where they ask me about any of these kind of things. They usually want to know, well, what about Tipper Gore? And then I go, yeah, I haven't heard you explain the big note before. What?
We'll return with Nigey Lennon and Bob Dobbs in a moment.
Yeah, so Nedgy, I want you to talk about whatever you think in terms of your knowledge of music. Relate to what he says, the big note is cycles and rates. Try to do it, you know, be quiet and let you improvise what you think is percussive, the rates.
Well,
relate
no,
that.
You started, Bob, by asking her that.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, ready?
In other words, does
Go,
it?
Bob.
No, don't go yet. Just before you got to introduce it, don't you?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, but before you do
No,
it,
Let him get it. Let him get a grip on what he wants to say.
yeah, I just want.
No, because he'll get a grip for 10
No,
minutes.
it's all right. No, I won't. Look, you're making me forget. Shut up! I'm forgetting what the hell we're talking
Okay,
about.
okay, you wanted to. Okay.
if I take a shit, we'll show up on the tape
Oh, no,
recorder.
We'll show up on the tape.
Just shut
Only
the door.
smell.
Yeah, like crap.
The smell-o-vision.
Yeah.
There's a problem if we get smell-o-vision. We'll start taping your smells, and they'll be there
The
again.
garlic I had for lunch and
Yeah.
God knows what. Yeah.
Right now,
Okay.
what the hell? Don't just hold it, Jerry. Don't
Okay.
tape. What the hell? I was going to ask you about the universe. Oh, is that a new idea for you? What he said about
No.
cycle rates?
Not
Okay,
at all.
good. That's all I want to know.
Okay, ready?
That's
You're going to intro it, Jerry.
I'm going to re-intro? Okay. And now we continue with Bob Dobbs and Nigey Lennon.
Now, Nigel, in light of the quote I read, what ideas do you get about Frank from your knowledge now in retrospect, as you got to, over the last 20 years, understand Frank's music more, and if you want to relate back to things you remember he said to you at that time that might have related to the big note quote you have here?
Yeah. Well, what I realized about Frank.
When? You sort of give different
Yeah,
time.
right.
Now,
At this point, which is 1995.
his death made you realize, so to speak.
A lot of things, yeah,
Yeah.
because I hadn't listened to his music in 15 years when he died. So.
And these reviews are done, they're from the point of view of now, at
Right,
the end.
yeah, I did went back and listened to everything I could
Yeah.
when I was writing the book. So, yeah, we'll put it into that context. It's absolutely very much the present as applies to 1995. Frank, to me, in retrospect, as I go back and look at his work, much to my amazement, is so consistent and rigorously logical in that every piece that he ever recorded, released, or otherwise intuited, in any kind of form that was ever publicly somehow brought to light by him in his oeuvre, fits into a larger composition. And this was something I sensed. It was so funny because when I knew Frank back, especially on that tour in '71, which was my first really unprotected exposure day after day to him. Yes,
Right,
go ahead.
and for a time, it was the August for a month when you were at Zappa school, August '72.
Yeah.
That was the other. It was only
That was
a
the
month.
other end of it, yeah.
Yeah, that was the period of intense 4 weeks of involvement
Yeah.
with him, seeing him.
Right, but
Yeah.
also on the tour too, playing and
Right, there's two aspects.
Right. Actually,
all-
one was listening. The later one was listening. The earlier one was actually performing.
Yeah, the private Frank,
Mhm,
he's what he likes to do and personally with music,
Right.
and then the public Frank. So
Right.
you were saying in the public point.
So publicly and privately, it's sort of a macro thing. I mean, he would, all his work again it's staggering when you really start looking at it. The closer and closer you get to it, the more consistent it becomes. It's like some kind of a mathematical model.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
there's.
And that quote that you had a little bit.
No, just
yeah,
I think you were going to talk about when you were on tour in '71. You were going
Right.
to say, what did you notice then, or is it?
What I sensed, again, see, if you want to look at it as a two-phase operation for me of education, on the tour, I sensed things intuitively. I had no concrete evidence of any of it. I just had sense of things being true about Frank.
And you described it pretty well. You were sensing of it. You knew what to remember when you wrote the book.
Right.
But because you remembered viscerally what you did notice.
Right, exactly.
And you noticed there was something, controlled, conceptual, consistent in him.
Frank was messing with reality, and in that quote that was kind of funny about if you're really arrogant, you view the universe as an imposition.
That's almost Frank's.
Yeah.
He almost was partly that, wasn't
Yeah, right. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Alfred Jarry, too, who did very much the same thing with his life by becoming his character Ubu and living his life that way. But so I sensed that Frank was doing this, and it just felt like being... I mean, I never took drugs. I was never into drugs in any way. But it felt like what I imagine it must be like to take a really terrific psychotropic drug.
That's what you thought then.
Yeah, and it was just a sense that I had of Frank controlling reality to the point that it was really exhilarating. Sometimes it was kind of strange.
Yeah.
I felt like I was all at sea and adrift in the cosmos.
Did you feel like you were among the movie freaks?
Sometimes.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Which
yeah.
he put in his
United
Mutations
yeah.
favorite movie.
It was.
In other words, you sometimes look at Frank and say, "This guy's some kind of perverted image that would."
Sure.
That would come out of the environment around him. That's what you saw.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you stand back.
Yeah, because when you mess with reality that much, there's nothing really left to hang on to.
Right, he might just kill you right out of the blue
You
or
could,
something.
yeah. I never really felt that about him, but I did feel sometimes that the energies kind of went from positive to negative sometimes because it was just intense,
Yeah, there's a story what he did, he fired somebody. He yelled at someone for being late. That's where you saw the negative
he was
part.
giving him hell, and it was just like, ooh, this is horrible.
Yeah, it's a little extreme.
Ugh,
Yeah.
You don't have to go that far.
Yeah, right.
And then he was like, he felt a little funny about it because when we got back to the motel room, he was like being really nice and solicitous and gave me a back rub and stuff.
He felt, he knew that you.
Yeah.
Okay, but when
anyway,
you say it was like being on a drug, you mean you felt that he was on a drug?
No. I felt like the experience I had entered into in working with him
That you were on a drug.
was I was on drugs.
And he had this alchemical energy to create, work the whole environment that you would get inside. But the drug was Frank's body, dog chemistry. His mental and his dog body chemistry swallowed you up in the vortex, and then you'd be stuck in there.
Right, and am I ever going to get out? That was what I was wondering sometimes. And it was really a powerful feeling, and nothing I had ever experienced in my life up until that point, which I was 17. What did I know? Had been anything like that. I thought it was great. If I'd been a little older, I might have been both more closed off to it and more upset when it did happen.
Right, you were just at the right age to be young enough to flow with it and take it.
This is a slight digression, but when I read a book a number of years ago about primitive societies and adolescent initiations, and one of the things that was done with both young boys and young girls in certain tribes, I think in New Guinea, I think it was, they were cut off at the same age I was, 17, from all of their peers and their family, taken away by shamans, and the boys were given hallucinogenic drugs and had visions and somehow found their place in society by kind of relating to the internal to the external. The girls, on the other hand, weren't given drugs, but they were sexually initiated. And I felt like
by the women?
By the men. These older guys.
I mean, they lost their virginity?
They would lose their virginity.
These guys would.
Well, they wouldn't rape them, but I mean,
ritually lose their virginity.
Right. And I kind of felt like, well, even though I wasn't a virgin, and even though I didn't take drugs, I kind of went through something very similar with Frank. It was a mystical initiation. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when did you read that book?
3 or 4 years ago, probably.
Did it remind?
It reminded me a little bit of Frank. It kind of jogged some.
Right. In other words, you hadn't thought of that up till you read the book. You didn't relate that process.
When I was writing the book, it all came back to me. I thought, aha, here's sort of like it's a subject.
When you read the book a few years ago, you thought of Frank. When you wrote this book, you said,
I really thought of it.
You said, oh, that book is telling me what I went through.
Right, exactly.
Now that's real. Now we said hours ago that Frank was the cool high school teacher.
Right.
Well, it's even more tribal. He was a shaman.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when you listen to Steve Vai and the younger guys, not the Don Preston, same age group.
Right.
They always talk for Frank with glowing. It was a great experience. He was the greatest musician. They're like little guys, the kids who've been shamanized. Yeah. And so that you really did get. Now, would you say Frank consciously did that?
I don't know how conscious it was.
I think he was trying to do it to the universe.
Yeah,
and you just happened to got the micro version. You got the micro version.
Some kind of fractal variation. Yeah. It was
no, you should. This is what do they call it? I was a Frank abductee.
I did one interview with a news service, and it was like I was a sexual fugitive. It came out I was a sexual fugitive harbored in the basement, and I thought that came out great.
You said.
Well, it was partly a quote of mine, but it was kind of twisted a little bit the way those things often.
They put that in there.
And they put it. It was the lead.
Right now, I don't want to emphasize that.
No,
I think that that it was a very privileged, special experience.
Yeah,
That you got
absolutely,
hijacked,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you never wanted.
Space aliens, you know, stole my luggage, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but you had a drug without the drug. Now you
Yeah.
never wanted to take drugs after, and you never did.
No.
And you never did before.
No.
But it seems everybody in the '60s was going to have to deal with drugs somehow, and you got it
I
through
got
Frank.
it. I got through Frank.
The
Yeah.
chemical monstrosity.
Right.
I mean, you think of the metaphor. You could even think that he knew that he was trying to provide a counter Leary, another form of drug.
Sure.
Because in World for the Money, that the Life magazine article 68, he says we produce a chemical monstrosity like a household ammonia or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
and he did that chemical thing. So that's alchemy.
Well, because Frank was, don't forget, into when he was blowing things up, he was making his own chemicals.
Right.
So he, I mean, alchemy was a very real thing for him. It wasn't, you know, some kind of abstract concept.
Yeah, he didn't follow the little catalog
No,
or
no.
the manual.
Yeah.
He was taking
Yeah.
risks then.
Right. Yeah. Always. Actually, the last time I ever heard him play any guitar stuff was recordings of the '88 tour. He's still doing it. He's still blowing things up.
Okay, now
So anyway, yeah.
how
but
do
you
we
can-
rate? Okay, so we're talking about
you
how
got
does the
kind of
big
far
note?
afield.
Yeah, you talked about
Yeah.
you saw something consistent.
Yeah.
Now, what was the consistency? What was it?
In a sense, it was that Frank. I mean, whether he was very detail-oriented, of course. Every little thing that came under his nose was grist for the mill and ended up in his work some way or other. Partly digested, some of it, and some
If
of
it
just
fit,
gets spewed
if
out.
it somehow
One
resonated.
size fits all.
Yeah, one size fits all. Okay, if you look at you see, I asked him that in this interview. I
Yeah,
said,
he had a different spin on it for the interview, I hear. But
no, one size fits all. I said, I thought he said in the Rolling Stone, he says he was misquoted. I said, you take an event and you impose a pattern on it. He says, no, I never impose a pattern on it. Now, it might have been a semantics because because he is imposing a pattern. Look at Civilization Phase 3, the way he takes from Lumpy Gravy. And Lumpy Gravy, the first one, he just took these random quotes and made them fit his point
Sure.
about the big note.
Right. And then with Civilization Phase 3, he's extrapolated or interpolated more dialogue to give it a storyline almost.
Right.
Or a philosophical one, anyway.
Okay, so you were
So-
impressed with Civilization Phase 3.
Yeah and no. I mean, I think it's kind of like, it's too bad it was his last work, because I wish he could have, for me, his work really ended with that Ensemble Moderne rendition of the G-Spot Tornado. That's the way I'd like him to kind of go out, in my mind.
All right, but didn't didn't you? No, he was Lionel. He said he liked. Who said they liked Civilization Phase 3?
It wasn't me. I mean, it's not that I don't like it. It's just that I find it's kind of tough going because the music is a lot less graspable than a lot of his stuff. I mean, I know what he's trying to do, but it's kind of labored to me. And the dialogue is interesting, but there's an awful lot of it.
Okay,
So, yeah.
But you did say that the Civilization Phase 3 has the plague theme. You
Yeah,
see
it
the
does,
plague
it
theme.
does.
Now, maybe
Yeah.
does that relate to? Okay, we're going to
That's
try
one
to
of the
stick
elements.
technically musical structure. What's the
Yeah.
musical point of Frank, other than all things are happening at the same time?
We've actually kind of narrowed it down today, I think, to sort of the good Frank, bad Frank almost. The dog Frank, the dog energy, and the high-minded energy. And the pivotal character in all this, of course, is Dr. Zircon / Uncle Meat, who can either labor in the sense of bettering mankind or the destroying angel, you know, blasting him to hell. And Frank's music, that dichotomy is very, very apparent.
In other words, he's acting
Yeah.
out the collective schizophrenia. There's a lot of
That's the
today.
20th century dilemma.
Yeah.
And it's true, it comes to a head in Civilization Phase
So
3.
rock
Yeah.
gave him a medium to create the schizophrenia metaphor
Yeah.
in relation to classical music.
Beginning with, because sure, high-minded again, which was
Yeah.
Varese working, quietly in his lab on Sullivan Street. He was the good Dr. Zircon.
Yeah.
And then you get somebody like, on the other hand, Guitar Slimmer Johnny Guitar Watson, who was, that guitar was like dynamite. Frank viewed that distorted guitar style, that R&B style, as a stick of dynamite, literally,
Yeah.
or a loaded charge.
It was a dynamite for him. He recognized it, blew
Right.
him up,
Right.
and then he wanted to say, "This is aesthetic. This is a principle.
Right.
This is a metaphor
Right.
of alchemy."
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
that's where he wasn't
that's-
completely a musician. He was a.
Oh no.
He used
no.
music as a metaphor.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't.
It was abstract in a strange sense. He was taking,
Yeah.
but see, that was the thing with Frank. He was always driven to make concrete that which was intrinsically abstract. And way back at the beginning of this interview, this conversation, I mentioned that I needed to probably run into Frank, and it was really fortuitous that I did, because I had very abstract notions about what I wanted to do with music.
And he concretized
he was he was Mr. Concrete. So and that was, I think, with him, that pull was always there. And you hear it in all his music, and that's another consistent element. But when I say the elements are consistent, it's almost frightening. Every interview that he ever did, every piece of music that he ever recorded, good, bad, indifferent, and they do run the gamut, all of those things, they still have, at the core of them, there's an atom of sameness. And it's almost like you're really looking at the universe macro and micro.
And have we pinned down the atom? It's made up of the electron is Dr. Zircon, the proton is Varese, and the nucleus is him. You know what is the atom? I think it's whether the present day composer can live or not.
Yeah.
Isn't that what it is? Whether there is music. Because I'll supplement that by saying.
Well, it's music. It's because yeah. Go ahead.
Kent Nagano, I think this would be relevant. Says it says Frank solves some musical problems in the 20th century. Blah blah blah. He thinks a lot of Frank, but he says Frank disagrees. Frank says he's just an entertainer. Now, see, there's the dialectic, whether he's a serious composer or an entertainer, and he says at the end.
Well, I think that's it's kind of like getting on one side of the issue, which is Frank liked to entertain, but you know he just didn't want to admit it. I'm sure he himself is a very serious person.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not. In fact, one of the things when I first met him, that Bizarre Records interview back in 1970, he was kind of being the stern, kind of avuncular, paternalistic kind of guy. In the sense he thought I was much too trivial. I mean, because I tend to take things lightly. People don't, you know, like Frank had no way of knowing this, and when I was like 15, I was, you know, probably seemed relatively giddy. But I think very fast, and I tend to put things in humorous context. That may not be what I feel, but he misunderstood. He thought maybe I didn't take life seriously. He didn't realize how seriously I took it till later. And anyway, so
when did he realize that? When's later?
Probably towards the end, he began to realize what a serious person I was.
The end is in 72.
75.
Oh, 75.
75, yeah.
In other words,
it took him a while to begin to understand me. In fact, the song Andy on One Size Fits All, he was trying to grapple with who I was.
How do you know that's about you?
Oh, I could run all the references down.
Oh, okay. So there are references. It's not.
Oh no, it's
your
a whole
fantasy.
string of. No, it's a whole
because
string
didn't we always think? I thought it was Andy Devine.
Andy Devine was
that TV
the guy with the squeaky. He had a squeaky voice, and the reason that there's the reference to that in the song is because one of the things I had to do was Howard Kalin would get laryngitis periodically on the tour, and whenever he did, it was the Andy Devine School of Voice, because Andy Devine had a very squeaky voice, and that meant basically that was almost like the code word. I got to sing tonight, so I had to get up and. So hearing that in that context,
that's what it is.
It makes perfect sense.
It's a reference to Kalin, and
right.
And the thong. There was also a thong.
That's the shoe. It's in the book.
Yeah, that's the shoe.
The shoe.
Okay, how? Just to the other point, how is Muffin Man about Ray Collins? How do you know
that? That was what they used to call him at the Garrick Theater, because remember he used to do all that stuff with vegetables and.
So you say that here.
And,
Do you agree with that, Jerry? Would you say? That,
I mean, Ray admitted that.
Excuse me, I'm just going to let loose here. Okay, you were saying, Jerry?
Yeah, I agree.
That they called him. You didn't know they called him Muffin Man.
No.
But
that was an old nickname that he'd had for a long time.
Right. Yeah. We haven't had a chance to ask Ray that.
You can ask him. Yeah, absolutely.
We can. Does Ray know? Well, he would know, wouldn't he?
He's in the book.
Yeah, but
we were really good friends.
But you don't.
I haven't seen him in a while, but yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah, but you don't ask Ray. What do you think of Frank doing a song about you? You never discussed that with Ray, did you?
No, because by that time Ray didn't have anything to do with Frank.
Right.
I was like really pissed off at him because that situation with what happened with he finally he was like in really dire straits, and Frank didn't give a good goddamn.
And that's in Pamela's or Michael Gray's book about they're yelling in '67 in London to each other. Okay, now.
But anyway,
So
getting back to what we were talking about.
So the entertainer seriousness. See, I saw Frank working out. What's the role of music? What's the role of sound in this sound-obsessed society? That was a dilemma. That's the seriousness. But
he was serious in all of the work. I mean, all the work he did, he put 100% into all of it. Whether it was a little, like again, macro and micro, a little detail or a big gesture, and that comes through in all his work. I mean, the more I listen to his stuff, the more I realize that it has the integrity that it comes from. Is that it's like this, almost a schizophrenic stretch from incredibly jokey throwaway kind of stuff, like the band that I was with in '71, all the way through to the end, like Civilization Phase 3.
Right.
Now, how could one mind create this? But there is a unifying principle.
But I think that's where he was a modernist and maybe even a postmodernist. That there was he knew that divisions between high and low didn't work anymore.
Yeah,
and
right. That was where he was ahead of the game, I think, too, because that was not a common concept at all.
That's where he was a genius in that level.
Yeah,
You can't say.
But he didn't. It's funny because like all innovators, really, he wasn't thinking about it that way. It was just in him. It was either Varese or Guitar Slim, and he thought it was all good music.
Yeah.
And
now here's the thing. He would say, "I like it. It's just an extension of me."
Sure.
But the same as he had put a lot of concepts into it to build up around the preference of taste.
Yeah.
Now there's a dialectic in him. How much is he would acknowledge that it's just his taste, because I think he thought other people should get the point too.
Judging by the way he played stuff for me and tried to kind of get me to listen to what he thought was good music, he was very elaborate about it. it was kind of almost like the unspoken message was, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
But it never passed his lips. He didn't say, now you should listen to this because it's good. He says, this is some stuff that I like. But
now this goes back to the series. Now he thought you were, this is the male chauvinist, he thought you were a giggly little teenager?
Well, that was at the beginning. This was more like when I was there in 72,
yeah.
playing stuff in the basement. It wasn't the end, but his thought was, I think, that I needed to be steadier in the way that I approach. Because see, here he was dealing with this vast body of stuff in a very serious kind of business-like way. With me, I tend to be a lot more scattered. You know, I would.
In other words, a personality difference, a temperament.
Oh, there definitely was.
In other words, you were.
Yeah.
You were serious, but the way you came across to him,
Mm-hmm.
he thought you had the potential to be serious.
Right.
And you should be serious.
Right,
And
and
it would
he
be
thought-
good if you were serious.
Right, and he was
And you
like,
and he didn't know you were.
Yeah, I described it actually to somebody the other day. You know, in Robert Crumb's Mr. Natural comics, how Mr. Natural is always lecturing Flaky Foont in different ways. Well, Frank kind of set himself that role with me. He was always sort of trying to show me the ultimate reality, whether I understood it or not. And he figured sooner or later I was sharp enough I'd figure it out. And I guess he was right, because I think I have, but
Well,
sort of, you know.
Say that again? You think he was...
I think he was right, because I've got it. It's taken me, you know, like 25 years, but I think I really do understand his work perfectly.
Right,
as
you're
well as
saying
anybody can.
he wants you to... I missed the word.
He wanted me to, in other words, he wanted me to get grip on the ultimate reality.
And you think you did
Yeah.
as he understood it. And
Yeah.
You think you got his message.
Right, I got his message, and of course, now there's hundreds of other universes out there that I didn't know existed, so it's kind of like you never really end that process. But his music is about that in a lot of ways.
It did. You mentioned when he mentioned at Lionel, he knew Art Kunkin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's Art Kunkin, but Frank was interviewed in the L.A. Free Press in summer of '69.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy starts off, I think it was a guy, Paul Eberle.
Oh, Paul Eberle could have been.
Just the name comes to my mind.
Yeah.
And he says, I see your work music as you're like a Zap Comics. And he said, no, I have no problem with that. That's right, I'm Zap Comics. So did you know that he actually acknowledged the Crumb reference, which was popular right then?
I wonder if he was like being a little comical or not. No pun intended.
No, but like you said, it was.
Yeah,
like,
no, but I think he understood there was something like. Do you know that famous line from Crumb? In fact, he released it as a postcard. He shows that his father was crazy as a loon and sort of lectured.
Wait, I missed you. Who?
Crumb. This is Crumb. He had a panel in one of his strips, and he released it as a postcard. He said, "My father used to say, son, life is mostly hard work." And it's like the most existential. It's hilarious, but it's existential at the same time. That was Frank.
What,
Frank was medieval. I mean,
Frank was a hard worker.
Sure he was.
He was the father.
Yeah, right, exactly. He was like, the first thing Frank ever said to me at that meeting, which is the first thing I talked to him briefly on the phone to set up the meeting, and that was it. But the first thing he said, face to face, sitting about like where you're sitting, and I'm sitting about where I'm sitting, he looks at me and says, that steady look, it chills your marrow if you're not ready for it. He says, my father always used to say to me, the road to hell is paved with good intention.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm sitting there going, oh, God.
But it's like a cult. It's like a cult. He's beginning.
This means something. And
Yeah. Okay.
But putting it in the context of where you wanted it, I guess.
Right. Now, just to go back, you said, why did you mention your...
I mentioned the Robert Crumb thing.
Did he ever talk...
Yeah, because you say he was quoted in this interview as saying, sure, that reference is fine. Well, I agree in the sense that probably whether... he read Crumb and liked him or not, the sentiments are kind of the same.
Right.
Like that thing about the road to hell is paved with good intentions is a lot like life is mostly hard work.
Right.
It's the same kind of thinking. It's very, very paternalistic medieval thinking.
Right. Now, the thing, the point was, now what was it? It's just the Crumb thing.
Okay.
The hardware. Oh, did he ever talk about... Once I read that he had fights with his father over Shakespeare and beat him up on the lawn if he brought the car home late.
Yeah.
Did he ever give you stories about his life with his father?
I met his father.
Yeah.
And in the interview there where Frank is talking about molecular rates, it's his father talking.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a new information.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Frank was his father in
Really?
a lot of ways. Oh yeah. They were one of the
I saw it as a metaphor.
Did you ever meet his dad or see his dad?
No.
Yeah, poor fellow, he passed away.
About 73,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah, when Frank was on tour, as a matter of fact. I remember he was real upset about it, didn't want to admit it to anybody.
How did you meet his father? Where would that
I came to
happen?
the house, actually.
Like
when
in
I was
72?
there.
August
Yeah,
72?
when I was there, yeah. I guess he wasn't really that well, and he'd come to the house, could do some business stuff. But he's a very cheerful little guy. He'd sit there and talk your ear off.
So he was down in the basement?
He was down, yeah, I just happened to run into him. I was like, I saw this guy. I said, are you Mr. Zappa Sr.? And he said very proudly, yes, because he was really proud of the fact that he had this famous son. He used to pull stunts all the time, like, run ads to sell cars and things, and he put in there Frank Zappa's father has 55 Chevy for sale.
You
In the
would say
local
that?
paper. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, you're saying
So,
that
but anyway,
you talked to him and
yeah,
he
totally
talked
did.
about
Well,
metaphysics?
He didn't talk about metaphysics, but he's Mr. Scientist. And I could see
Yeah.
right away it was like the light bulb went off, because
Right.
here is where Frank gets those theories from. His father was Mr. Theory too. It's like everything fit into a system.
Right, and he demanded
And
Frank to like Shakespeare, and Frank wouldn't.
Frank said, "Go to hell,"
Yeah.
and it's like, he's
But, like,
bucking the system.
yeah. But Frank was
But,
like,
yeah.
his father's like a cult. You got to understand Shakespeare. You've got to learn this stuff.
It's funny because I think so many of us are kind of condemned to repeat our parents without really understanding them, and Frank certainly, I think, fit that.
And yet it's
picture.
part of his, he at least saw some dilemma his father was in as a government conspiracy scientist or implicated in it, and
Yeah.
whether it was good or not.
Well, that must have been the dilemma for him, because he must have realized how much of his father's emotional makeup and biological makeup he was part of him.
Yeah, that's just very interesting. So
Yeah.
that is the male spirit in Frank that he put up as an anti-environment to everything else that's going around. Or that, I don't know, it's not macho, but just male energy. It really comes from him wrestling with his father, presenting that to him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's so many of his songs, you get little snippets of that. I don't remember what it was, but it just struck me, a little while ago we were talking about something. And in the song, that it wasn't his better period, but the song Trying to Grow a Chin. I mean, think of that conflict described in that. It's real edible.
Yeah.
Real edible.
And, we talked about Frank as a dictator or tyrant.
Actually, My Guitar Wants to Kill Your Mama, that's what I was thinking, because it described that relationship, that abortive high school relationship, so perfectly. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, but it's funny how he took the Hitler thing. What is it? It's like in the different.
You turn the mustache upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You have to be careful with that kind of symbolism, I think.
right, but he knew that if he controlled a band in the rock context, that even though he got that very early, before he became the conceptual Frank Zappa, but it's interesting that he said, I'm going to be a mock dictator in my band, and it's disciplined, a reverse Hitler, a software Hitler rather than a hardware Hitler.
Yeah.
I always thought that was the meaning. Do you think he meant that by that, or it's just?
I don't think so, because I saw pictures of him when he was in high school and it grew like that.
Yeah,
it
he had
was
it
stringy,
He had it before he would think about it that way.
Yeah.
So is the atom in the universe, and that's the Vatican, is the father-son relationship?
Yeah, it's Catholic. It's the father
Catholic
and the
thing.
son. Yeah.
So is that the conceptual continuity?
It's the root of it,
Right.
and from there it's very, very consistent. Yeah. Frank was the sum of his experiences, but he was much more. Like any great artist, he took those experiences and transformed them in the process of creating his own reality. He made a really fascinating universe that anybody can get into if they want to give it a chance. Took me 25 years. Might take somebody else 5 minutes.
You mean after 5 years, after he died, it took you 25 years to understand and enjoy it?
Well, I know I always enjoyed it, but to really understand it in an intellectual sense. Now
that's different from getting into it. You got into it when you were young.
I got into it in an emotional sense.
But it took you 25 years to understand it.
Now I'm beginning to. See, I'm getting older. I'm 41.
Yeah.
When I knew Frank, he was almost 30.
Yeah.
And the big age difference, for one thing. If I'd been older, that's why I said I wish I was at least 10 years older, because I could have understood a lot faster. It would have saved me a lot of time. But I'm beginning to understand, more and more. I mean, probably by the time I die, I'll understand Frank perfectly, if I'm still thinking about him.
And you'll understand the peculiarity of your relationship with him.
Yeah.
And so, but you're saying...
I understand that now, whereas I didn't before.
But you didn't try to understand him, so to speak, from 85 to 93.
No, because...
It was when he died, you had to go back and check it out, right?
Yeah, because I realized, well, this is... It was a very simple, physical, almost emotional response. I realized, well, why do I feel like this?
Yeah.
This must have been very important to me. Well, let's investigate this. Let's not just let this lie. Let's find out what this was.
So did you start writing the book, but at the same time started listening to the music?
Yeah, right. I
went back.
The first thing I did was I wrote the obituary that appeared in the Independent in London and some other places. And
how did you get that in there? I mean, that's in London, England?
Yeah, the paper.
They asked you to write the obituary?
They didn't ask me. What I did is I wrote it. And it was funny because usually for me writing is a very tedious process. And two things happened. We just got a Macintosh computer, which I never worked on a Mac. I've been working on IBM and I never liked it. Got this Mac and I sat down at it and it was like going into automatic writing. I just put my hands on the keyboard and about 6 hours later this piece was written. And I looked at it. I mean, Lionel encouraged me to write it. I looked at it. It was the easiest thing I'd ever written, and it was real smooth and seamless, and it flowed and it said a lot. So.
And you then sent it out, offered it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sent it around, and the funniest story about it, it went to the Indy bought it. Actually, the Observer wanted it, but it was too late. The Indy had already got it. It appeared here, the Baltimore City paper, Frank's hometown, the alternative paper there, and some other places. But what happened? Another funny thing was it was sent. I also sent it to the New Yorker. I faxed it to everybody I could think of, and this was.
This
like,
is after you cried, after that breakdown a few days after Frank. Remember?
Oh, that was out in Paradise.
I faxed it.
Yeah, you faxed it. Yeah.
No, you cried a few days
Yeah,
later.
when I went out
and
to
then,
Paradise.
then you went home and wrote it?
Yeah.
After he dealt, you
Well,
had-
actually,
you-
it was.
Lionel said you were crying. Well, you got to deal with this kind of thing.
Yeah, right. I was.
So then
just
you
crying.
wrote it.
Yeah.
And that's about 10 days later. So
Yeah,
after
it was
he died.
about a week after he died. Yeah, and it ran. It was snatched up, and it ran like a day after it was picked up. Really. So at any rate, what happened then was I realized, well, if it's this easy for me to write this,
Yeah.
I can probably write a whole book, and I bet there's some stuff to be said here. I'll learn something, nothing else. And so I did.
Which album did you go to first? Can you
The
remember?
first one I listened to, I happened to have somebody had given me a copy of The Best Band You Never Heard in Your Life.
So you didn't have all the latter ones.
And I
You
had
to-
stuff on vinyl. I had no CDs hardly. I just really only got into CDs pretty late in the game. It's funny. So anyway, I had the vinyl stuff, which I hadn't listened to in years, because I didn't have a turntable that worked for a while. And
You did the best band first?
The Best Band You Never Heard in Your Life, and I had a few others. I had, what did I have? Oh, Hot Rats, of course, because I never was without that. I would even listen to that once in a blue moon, not very often. So yeah, and then what I did is, of course, I went on a big buying spree. I ended up buying the whole catalog, and of course, Ryko came out just recently with everything reissued. So I think that they ought to send me all of those CDs if they're listening.
So,
It's the least you can do, guys.
Right. So the
but
thing is
anyway.
that you had a few of your vinyls. What do you think you kind of focused
So-
on first?
Well, I listened over and over again to Best Band You Never Heard in Your Life because it was a retrospective. It had a lot of old
Yeah.
stuff on it, and then the one I got after that was, of course, the Mega Jazz Noise Here, which is part of that same tour, and it seemed organic somehow, and it was, and it really got, those were kind of the sinew and the viscera of my experience while writing this, and it got into me emotionally a lot. Then I went back and just, the hell with it, and I just started to buy everything at random. I started with the stuff I liked the most. I had Heart Rats, so I got Burnt Weenie Sandwich, I got all the stuff from the period when I was working with Frank, and listened to that, and you name it, and ended up, virtually there's nothing I don't have now, so it's a lot of CDs. And what I've done is, as Ryko has re-released, the stuff I'm the most interested in, I've gotten those new re-releases and listened to them very critically, because during the time I was working with Frank, I was in the studio with him quite a bit, and I heard original versions of a lot of those albums, and I just was curious. In fact, they re-released Overnight Sensation not that long ago. It was about a month and a half ago, I think. I was doing a thing for Westwood One Radio Network, and I was taping at it was actually up at their studios, which are in Santa Clarita. And that Ryko sampler had just arrived, and the music director, we were sitting in his office, shooting the breeze, and he puts it on the beginning of Dirty Love, which I'd heard a million times in the studio, and I never liked the way it sounded on vinyl. And I listened and said, wow, they've sure cleaned that up. It sounds a lot like the master tape. So, yeah.
That's a good thing about these reissues.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I here I am shilling for them, and don't know really what they think of me, but I've talked to them a few times.
Okay.
But anyway, but yeah.
What in your musical compositional knowledge, even though you haven't done that for many years, what was the core idea of Frank's?
Okay.
Within the music jargon,
Okay.
say what the essence of Frank was.
Okay, theme and variations on a very grand scale. Because everything fits into, if you want to look at his work, what he's talking about there with rates and molecular, almost like molecular disintegration, it's a very slow decay. It's like we were talking about, he wanted those long guitar solos.
Yeah.
There you go. See, once something became part of his musical, or his vocabulary, whatever you want to call it, the decay rate is extremely slow. The first time you hear it, might not have been the first time he thought of it, but the first time it pops up in his work, you can trace that element all the way through from wherever it starts to, wherever it ends.
So the radioactive plague?
I wouldn't say radioactive plague, but it has a half-life, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And if you take simultaneously all of these elements that are decaying at a very slow rate, although the slow rates vary a lot. Now we're starting to sound pretty metaphysical here.
That's good.
But the interplay of all of that slow decay all at once in this pretty bewildering, staggering universe of concept, that's sort of Frank. It's the axis, the lateral and the vertical and the horizontal.
Right. Are you familiar with Finnegan's Wake?
Yeah, somewhat.
I've said for years that Frank Zappa is Finnegan's Wake to music. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Have you read Ben Watson's book? Or, no, we looked at it.
Yeah, I've been through it. I've looked through
Now,
it.
he talks about Lewis and Finnegan's Wake. I've just read those things. I don't know if he's accurate. He's got the right book, but I don't know if he understands Finnegan's Wake the way you're talking about it and how it would be applied.
Yeah. Well, I don't. I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, there are people who have been studying Finnegan's Wake for years and years and years, and I would give them much more credit than myself there. But I think, you know, the way I grasp it, and it's the same thing Frank liked about Pynchon too. It's that real spatially aware conception of time. Is, you know, it has an axis, you know, vertical and horizontal, but you know, you can't limit it that way. It's, you know, it's ever, you know.
Okay, so is it I want in a little pop culture book about 1970-71. There's a little quote, and I never could find it. There's a guy or two I've met who had a lot of those books. They collected them. Never could find it again. But the quote was, "I think that music is way behind literature and the other arts, and I want to have music catch up." And in that sense, I always remember that, and I thought, okay, he's taking the accomplishments of Finnegan's Wake and applying it to the musical world.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. And if that quote is accurate, he was playing catch up, and he knew it, and he felt a responsibility to catch up.
I think he did. I think he really did, because.
Did he ever say anything along those lines?
Not in one specific statement, but a lot of different statements, I would say, yeah.
To you?
Yeah.
That he felt that the musical establishment had gone back, right?
Well,
it slowed down.
The one thing with Frank, see, he never, to me, because we were friends, and he was playing me music, and it was a relaxed environment. He never pontificated.
Right. But he would give things that he'd say those things.
He would drop in little hints, and I would pick up, and, you know, that, in a sense, that's what this book is my way of piecing together, you know,
what he said,
the total work. Like, as I've grown to understand his work, that's how this book has come about, is putting the pieces together. I could write a whole other one that would be, you know, a lot more in depth now, because this was just as I was groping towards the end of my conception of what was really going on with him.
All right, I would say that is time running out, right, Jerry?
Probably. We're getting kind of hoarse, the two of us.
Yeah. So I would say that
You've got 5 minutes.
Right. I would say that you did succeed in putting the pieces together. You made a contribution to understanding Frank, a big contribution. So I think there's nothing more for me to ask. If there's anything you have to say, you can say it, and then I'll say my last bit.
Well, I've got a question for you. You've been asking me really great questions. I don't know if this is a really great question, but what would you say Frank's gift to you has been, as someone who's very, very familiar and, you know, intimately knowledgeable about his work?
Well, as I've said on the radio, or I've written it, I've said it somewhere. I think it's in my book, a quote from one of my radio shows. Oh yeah, we went to the Zappa concerts in Buffalo in 1988, and my co-host asked me, why did you go there? And I said, even Bob Dobbs needs acoustic stimulation sometimes. And I said, Frank's the only one who gives me the acoustic release, which Frank often said. My people who attracted my music are in a tense situation, or in some situations that my music releases their stress. And the releasing that goes back to this quote: the stress and the melody and the dissonance. They build up the stress, then release it. The explosion. And for me, Frank was the only musician who I bought. I bought his stuff. I listened. You could get all the rest of it for free, and I listened to Coleman and lots of the whole range of music. But for me, Frank's music spoke to me the way you just. I think it's you. I just read this quote today, that the emotional makeup of Frank is similar to my emotional makeup, and his tones and textures are satisfying to me. You know, I don't want to say sexual, but it's you know, Clapton and them would play, but they never had the right timbre. They never had the right pitch. Frank had the right pitch, and so it was a totally pleasurable experience to hear Frankie. Matter of fact, I can't sing generally, I can't play, but I can. With Frank's music, I can sing, I can play. It's my music. It's me. So for me, Frank has always been me. Being Frank.
I think that should be where we should end it.
Oh, and I just want to add this.
That's a good tag. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good tag. But then I would, as an addendum, I'm now going to, honor Nigey by offering her the opportunity, which you listeners will never, for a while, get an opportunity to hear what Frank has to say now, because I talked to Frank a year ago through a medium.
Oh, really?
And we're going to end with that note, folks. We now see if Nigey will have the time or inclination to hear what Frank has to say now in spirit.
Absolutely, that sounds great.
And this has been Contemporary Communications Conference. My name is Jerry Fielka, and a big thanks to Nigey Lennon and Bob Dobbs.
Wasn't that a mind-blower ending?
It's great. Of course, it's not true, right?
Oh, no, it is true.
You really did.
And we were going to play you.
Okay.
If you have time.
No. How long was it? I'm curious.
It's over an hour. We just transcribed it, but I'd rather you hear the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just finished. You know, we're going to release it eventually. And
Mhm.
I don't know what we got a dilemma. Is Gail? Can she own?
That's
Frank,
that. You
beyond
guys
great.
being publishers.
Have that print that. That would be terrific.
Oh, would you like to? Are you
Sure.
you're publishers?
Sure, we'll publish that. You gotta be kidding.
Oh, okay. Well, then this is a practical thing for you to
I
hear.
would
Check
like-
it out.
Do you mind if you lie down and relax?
Let's all take a break.
Yeah.
You got anything to drink or eat or?
Yeah, we should maybe go eat and come back or something.
Yeah. How?
'cause-
In other words, you missed.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to get to the traffic. You're
No,
going to stay here longer, right?
No, that I gotta hear. You got me hanging over
Yeah,
the cliff.
yeah. Wasn't that a great ending though?
Yeah,
For them,
that's
they'll go,
true.
what? You talked
What?
to
Oh, darn. No. Well, they'll just be
No,
dying.
that's publicity.
Yeah.
Then we release it. You know, it's an
It
ad.
would be
But,
great.
maybe we want to take, since you don't have to rush home, eh?
Yeah,
I
'cause
don't know. He
I'm
might be. Is
starving.
Lionel bored?
Are you bored?
Well, I'm thinking of all the work I have to do before we
You
go.
can do it tomorrow. There's always tomorrow.
But I keep thinking this guy hates Frank, and he has to listen to
Yeah,
3
4
hours
and a
on
half.
Frank.
3,
Do you
4
wanna-
and a half.
do you wanna
It's a
go home
4.5-hour interview.
Is it really? Oh,
Well,
this one.
wait,
Yeah.
2 90s.
Yeah,
That's 3.
It's, yeah, 3. Hour and a
No,
half, twice.
2 at
There's
90s
3
plus a
90s.
3 90s.
Oh,
3
Jesus
90s. It's
Christ.
4. It's 4 and a half.
Well, it's like
hours.
6:30. Yeah.
It's longer than
Zappa's on.
Frank. With 3.5 hours now with Nigel, we did 4.5. We broke a new record.
Yeah, right. Boy.
In other words, we did 3 with 3 and a 4 with a woman. 3 with Frank and then with his wife, or ex-wife, whatever you were, his parallel
Right.
female principal.
Right.
we did it with 4. 3
We
is
did-
Trinity, that's male.
Right.
4 is feminine.
Uh-huh.
You know, the
Right.
fourfold alchemic.
Right, it's rounded, not angular.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, right. So,
I was going to suggest here, speaking of the male counterpart, would you like to go home and come back when this is all over? You go home and work
does
for
a
a while?
Marxist socialist want to hear the spirit?
Frank talking, you know. I mean, if
Well,
that,
no, that'd be sort of ridiculous. And I wouldn't
Yeah, he
work.
wants to
I'm
hear
too
it.
tired anyways.
Yeah, it falls asleep, but it's intelligent. It's
Yeah.
not silly. You're
Huh.
going to be amazed at this.
I'd
but
like to
don't
hear
you-
because that's the one thing I'm curious about. Where did Frank go? If anybody went anywhere interesting, he would be the. He's not going to, you know, he in his lifetime he kind of lived in a certain sense of kind of a boring life, and he was always seeking to bust out of it. So maybe this was his big chance.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing that comes through about reading your book is that Frank, you know, like you said, sir, if he was as intelligent as we assume he was, how ridiculous everybody was, and how he had to keep his sanity.
Yeah,
And
that's what I found. We never really got into that when we were talking about it, but I suspect that a lot of it was just tough for him not to, you know, he didn't want to be an asshole. I don't
Right.
think he, you know, he
he was
wasn't
under
a cold
stress of
intern.
what he saw,
Yeah.
the stress of
Yeah.
what he perceived.
Yeah, that was like Kafka, that Kafka thing again. Kafka just was horror for him. With Frank, I think it was, was trying not to be contemptuous, but he couldn't help it,
Yeah.
you know.
So he had this great stress, and that's why he had ulcers when he was young.
Oh, he had
supposedly.
horrible ulcers from the time he was like 13.
Yeah, it's like he was actually on a drug. And, you know, if you're on
Yeah.
a drug all the time, it'll stress your kidneys. He was on this intelligent
Yeah,
drug,
yeah.
and he was seeing all this absurdity
Mhm.
and going, why?
Mhm.
And then getting perverse, humorous reactions to it.
Yeah.
Nigel,
every-
can you call home and see if I'm curious about Boston book reviews?
Well, you can't call him back till tomorrow anyway.
I just want to know.
Yeah. I don't remember all of the keys you have to punch. There's a lot of different, and I just erase it, and then you'd hate me forever.
That's true.
So.
So, should we go get something to eat?
We
Oh.
really can't.
Oh, you can't?
What do you mean?
We
You
don't have
any
much
money?
cash. We don't have any cash on us at the moment.
We got cash, but you know I don't want to spend too much. But we can get.
Well, I'm
What-
not hungry actually.
Okay.
I'll go along for the ride, but
Jerry, what?
Okay,
well,
then
let's
we can just
let's
we
do
can
that. Do you
hang
have Do you want to make some bread or?
Yeah, we can just eat some bread and stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay,
you give us
so-
some little things.
so
to-
that-
If you guys are hungry, yeah, don't
let's
stop
let's
you.
walk. That's what I mean.
Let's walk.
Yeah, let's see if I can walk again.
Mm.
Why don't we just? I want to walk around in the yard for a minute. Let's walk and get some fresh air for a
Walk,
second.
walk.
Have you got the tapes already?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got to think about how. Well, we're playing the garbled part. We lead
Well,
up. To,
we play the first 12 minutes and then we
yeah, right.
break to the other.
Okay, I gotta have a piss. I just want to walk around for a minute.
Yeah.
So that was great,
Yeah,
Nigel.
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was pretty
Yeah.
in depth. I thought it was. Was that in depth?
Oh, I think, yeah. I mean, it's something you couldn't think of about another 100 things to say, but yeah.
Isn't the light off leak? Can you get of a light. I mean,
Oh, the low light is pretty good. It's
Really?
yeah.
I'm conscious of time, but
No,
what
no,
the fuck was
we're-
I always have
Okay,
a
you were
point.
talking about, all right, the point you were making was something about you talked to this guy on September the 29th, right, 1994, and he said this stuff about Frank, and there's a point, but you don't remember what it was.
I was going to. Oh, I want to explain that. No, you can't look at that yet. I'll get laid out. September 29th, I interviewed him. Okay, I did Frank.
Right.
Maybe I was going to explain what happened, but I thought there was something else.
Mm-hmm.
The Evergreens come through. I don't know if I'm going to get to talk to Frank, and so can I talk to Frank? And they said yes, we can locate him. So you give him the address. You give where he lived and what his dates were, and if he's dead. If he was alive, like when I did reading on Frank alive, I gave him the address, which I knew, and they just go into the house and they look at this guy. And actually, at that time, he wasn't there, and he wasn't there. He was on tour. You know what I mean? So then they know it. They said he's not there. He's in Italy or someplace. You know. But then they tuned in him on there, or they can get into the house, and that gives them a way to contact. So.
I'm afraid I'm a fairly thoroughgoing skeptic.
I know. I don't expect you to believe it, but it's an interesting story. You've come here to Candyland, Wonderland, and we're going to tell you a story.
We didn't know what to expect, so this is,
I guarantee you will. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I did it September 29th. I sent Jerry came through Toronto in October, and I handed him a copy because I wanted him to transcribe it. I hate transcribing. If I did that, I didn't want to ever do it again.
Yeah.
You didn't do that. You corrected the persons who did.
Oh yeah, actually someone else. But that was the painful process correcting it. Yeah, Carol's secretary did the original of that, which she loved because she loved the interview. But this one, I give to Jerry. He's going to transcribe it. So a few days later, a week or two later, he's back and he hears it. I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, I got chills because some of it is Frank." He says, "I know Frank, and I heard his personality coming through." So he got chills, and then he said there was a couple other things I wasn't sure on, but basically Jerry's gut reaction was
It was Frank.
It was it chilled him because it might have been. It looked like it was a good, it made the short list of that. This could be Frank, Okay, so we do the reading, and we contact Frank, and then the Evergreens. Now, when you talk to them, and they indicate often when he's talking. Sometimes they will interpret them, or they will translate them, and so it's oscillates back and forth between the group mind, whatever they are, or the guy who's assigned to interpret Frank, or the person that's assigned, the spirit assigned, and Frank himself. After about 10 minutes, she looked at the tape, or maybe it was 3 minutes. It looked, and it was going slow. It stopped, I think. It stopped. What's going on? So it never happened before. She rewound, and we played it, and it was going on, and it go woo, 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 and it was gradually the fucking tape was getting fucked up, and it came to a stop. So, because of the private signal for the crowd. So, okay, now you say what you said again, if you want. I said this. Now you respond to what I said.
Well, maybe constancy, continuity is that part, the part where you are changing.
Right.
And
yeah. But is that?
I don't know. It's like, to me, the more I think about it, whenever you hear people, either they're Christians or they're Americans or whatever, that's always a bad position to be.
Right.
To be in a fixed position.
Yeah, right. Today, as long as we got the TV environment, you're forced not to be fixed. But we should see the disservices of that too, and say, hey, we should demand our right to get back to where we can be fixed. You know what I mean? The media is making us not able to have fixed lives, and if you keep it going, people are going to get troubled in that situation. So So how do we get fixity? We can't, as long as we got the TV environments going. But if you know that, then that would provide you a kind of stability. If you understood that you're forced to be a quadrophenic, before people or whatever, if you understood why, then you could be it with a sense of detachment. And that's always what imagination is being detached from the embedment in reality. That'd be a Platonic view of imagination. The Aristotelian view of imagination is to work with your immediate sensory data and manipulate it into little pretty trinkets. The Platonic view of imagination is not embedded in whatever the sensory environment or medium is, and able to manipulate it with a detachment, right? Or with the goal of getting you undetached from it. But the Neoplatonic mystic says go way off into mystical realms. That's going too far. You have to work with this best of all possible worlds. The Leibnizian principle. So what you're saying. So I'm pointing out. You're just realizing that you can't be fixed.
What's the number?
But I'm also telling you why you have to. Why you can't be fixed. Then you have to think about that.
Shit, I should have it written
Because we're actually, that's the appeal of Rush Limbaugh. We're actually post the TV effect now. The software communism died in 1990. Clinton tried to keep it going. He failed. His nemesis, Rush Limbaugh, who represents fixity, old-fashioned fixity. And the people are ready for that. It won't work, but the mood is there to flip the whole trend of the last 30 years and go back to the 50s, 40s, or whatever they think fixicity is. They want that fix. They want to get back to basics. So that'll bring in the Republican Revolution, Sorry, I'm farting. I'm starting to fart a little bit here, so I hope it isn't bothering you too much. But I think it's the food I ate weeks ago.
No, I don't think you can fart from food weeks ago. Oh, now I remember what I was going to ask.
Yeah?
You were saying that the mirror is like mescaline.
Yeah.
In
what way? Mescaline, the Evergreens pointed out that mescaline's better than LSD because when you take LSD, it just stirs up the same thing. It's an interesting experience, but after a while, you're just repeating yourself. You're just doing the same thing. Mescaline seems, if you take it like once a year, you've changed. It will make you aware of the change you've gone through. So it doesn't create a repetitive experience. So it's an organic thing that's ready for you. It can communicate. It can trigger and communicate to you the changes you've gone through, rather than put you through the same story.
But there's a psychedelic effect for mirror, you're saying?
I'm saying mirror is organic like mescaline. It gives you a spiritual appraisal of yourself, and in a year, if you took mirror again, you wouldn't just have the same old script replayed to you like you do on LSD.
Is there anyone on the West Coast that administers it that you recommend?
No,
the Pacific Coast Highway, that lady used to.
Yeah, used to, but they're not doing it right, so they're discouraging people going there. There are other people. There's going to be they got seminars with people in October. There's going to be someone in Tucson who's going to be doing it. There may be someone coming from this area, but they don't recommend the person who's doing it. They're not doing it right, and they're trying to phase them out. And you have to be careful in doing that. You don't want to rub people the wrong way, and then they go around bad-mouthing you. So, wouldn't recommend it yet.
The thing is, you're trying to push or make this technique more available and all that, but there are many techniques for cure. I mean, I think there's cures for everything already.
Right.
Nobody's been successful in popularizing any of those.
Right. Well, mirror is because it's patented, and it's something only doctors can use. Only doctors can inject. So you're giving doctors a way out of the threat of the alternative things.
They won't
Well,
fight
then
it
it's
like
another
that.
thing, though.
What?
Then it's another thing where it's a way for someone to make money.
Right.
Yep.
Yes, but it's being run by people who don't need money. Ourselves. So we put on the money aspect as long as that appears to be necessary. But with cold fusion and the collapse of the money system coming up, we'll be ready to handle it. Well, it's just a way of getting it in the transition.
But then again, you're already in the state where you don't need money anyway.
That's what I said.
Obsolete, especially if you're in the.
He's in the state of confusion.
Yeah, that's what
Best state to be in.
That's what I said. It's being organized by people who don't need the money.
Yeah.
I met a dentist a few months ago who was sort of getting the he's sort of figuring out some aspect of this for himself. He takes a anesthesia that you would use in dentistry. It's fast acting. It only lasts like 5 minutes or something. And he puts it inside some kind of a chamber where he irradiates it with energies from crystals and gems and things like that to give it some kind of a vibratory structure. Then he injects it into acupuncture points. So it sounds like he's intuitively sort of picking up on what you guys are doing.
Well, yeah. Well, there is homeopuncture since the 70s.
Oh.
There is. It's called homeopuncture, injecting solutions in acupuncture points.
Mm.
This has that fourth factor of this technological spin. Remember, he was a gadget lover, gadget inventor at Popper Mechanics. He knew how to create this interesting mechanical thing, which a lot of people don't have the ability to think up.
Yeah. Because it sends it in
It makes it stronger. In simple terms, it boosts the potential in the combination of herbs, homeopathy, and acupuncture. It just fucking, you know, it's like putting a Tesla alternating current on it or
Herbs
something.
have to be personally selected for each individual.
The what?
The herbs that go into the
No,
remedy?
they got formulas. He made many formulas. He died, but Connie is now making all the formulas, and it's based on his notes and that.
Found it.
Go. Just say.
Is it,
And,
Yeah.
and no, I didn't finish. So it's there are formulas for different diseases. The amazing thing about Mir is it works on infections. Now, you know, chemistry doesn't do it. It creates bad side effects. The alternatives don't get infections, but they give you
And there's another guy named John.
they're palliative for your symptoms without creating side effects. So it helps a little bit. But nothing can get to the fungus, bacteria, virus, and the parasites. They're just beginning to recognize those 4 levels.
And you.
Mir gets at all those 4 levels. That's totally new, more powerful than anything it ever does, and it can dig out infections.
is it something only to be used for during illness, or can it be
Oh,
used
as I said, spiritual can be used. Many people who are better can.
We all have kind of weaknesses, I think.
Yeah.
And we,
Oh, cool.
Many people use Mir long after they've been cured. They keep doing it because they like what they just feel. I think it's
so
helping me.
do you get it?
Oh yeah.
Oh shoot. Okay.
What kind of evaluation do they do to figure out what you need? Just to,
Oh, they have all tests. It's medical, you know. They know how to do it. They have all kinds of tests to find out. It's run by one of the most competent doctors in the world, you know, Connie. She's a very famous, competent doctor, a genius in medicine. So she knows how to adapt this new environment. She's like the most qualified to understand what's going on here and to deal with the unknown. But it's all related. It's done in New York in 3 clinics, you know, with doctors and everything.
Well,
Is
he
it
left
expensive?
here a few minutes ago, so if he's coming
I think it's something like $50 a week or something. It's not cheap, but it's not expensive.
No, that's not bad.
Yeah.
This dentist I was just telling you about, it's like $300 a session or something.
The dentist,
Very
yeah,
expensive.
yeah. No, you know, then there's extra things. You might have to buy a couple of supplements. You have to, I think one of the conditions is that you go on a certain basic diet and you have to get Parablock, which purifies your food. You have to do that, especially if you're a patient.
what is that?
Something called Parablock, you put your vegetables and fruits in the water for 20 minutes and it eats away all the parasites in that. You gotta purify your food. And then you live in that purified diet as well as doing the Mir.
You gotta keep both hands in your pants like Bob. No, you
gotta keep your fucking testicles
No one noticed
fucking
that the
protected.
ultimate was Bob walks in, no one says anything except what I predicted Kyle will go, holy shit. And everybody's just sitting there sort of totally dumbfounded, couldn't say anything.
Well, we didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
I know. Well, Michael goes, what did Michael say? Like,
No, he was
is there
talking-
are you another Bob? He said, is there another Bob?
Oh, they
And
were
then-
they were talking to each other. I heard them say, "Is that Bob or something?"
You were right. Well, Michael's
When
like,
I was standing there.
Michael's good, but he doesn't. You know, we've talked about Mir and D-cell for years, and he's going, what's a Mir?
Yeah.
You know, but then Bob pulls his pants off right in front of everybody. The first thing he does is he goes.
I went, do I have my underwear on? Oh yeah, okay.
That was classic. You know, Bob, well, here I am finally in front of the guys. I got a.
Yeah, I get. Oh
I'm a
fuck.
man.
My kiss on every-
Wait. See, you know, and we always thought
Okay,
you were a
hold
black
it, Kyle.
woman, man.
We're what? A woman? A black one, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying they mumbled that when I stood there?
No, actually, when you came in and they were walking, I was confused too.
They were walking?
When
No, they
you
were-
walked in,
Yeah.
you know, you
I
were
sat
kind of
there.
walking by.
Yeah.
Then they were saying, "Is that Bob?"
Even after Kyle had gone, holy shit.
Yeah.
Kyle
What
recognized
did you
it.
think, Alan?
I didn't know either.
You didn't know what
think
was
it was him.
No.
And what'd you think, Scott?
Oh, I knew. I just didn't know what to say. It
Yeah.
was a good setup.
You saw me coming in the door.
Especially go,
yeah.
how'd you get the phone to ring?
That's what you said, right? That was you?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was coming in quietly. You know,
Oh man, he
and,
went.
and I saw this.
Yeah, Jerry says somebody. I heard something. Jerry says somebody at the door, and
I said,
at first I
Scott,
thought it
You-
was
oh,
the
he
wind.
said- you
I thought
said-
it was the wind or something.
What did he say?
Me and Scott especially heard it. Then you know you weren't coming in, so he says, Scott, go check the door.
But didn't Scott say I heard something?
Yeah, at the door.
Yeah.
You
Did you
rattled
say
the door
that?
a little bit or something.
Yeah, did you
before
say that?
I don't remember.
You didn't say anything. Basically, Jerry pointed out something happened at the door. Check it
Yeah.
out, because you leaned back.
Yeah.
Right. That was your checking out point?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I saw this head and I saw Kyle. I was looking through and I saw Kyle. I didn't know who it was, but I saw that head. And then you weren't visible, but then. And I wanted to come in, sort of sneak in, but I was opening the door and it was very quiet. I mean, very noisy. I got to a point where there's no way I could get in without making noise. So okay, here we go. I made noise, and just to make noise, you leaned back and looked and saw me. Right. So at that point, what did you see? Someone like down like this.
Yeah.
Were you worried?
No, I wasn't worried. I didn't. Are you kidding? With Jerry's friends, it could be anybody.
Yeah. So what do you think? Did you recognize me?
No, not until actually you were standing right here.
Yeah.
It was like starting to I was starting to match you up
No,
with the
then
pictures
he
I've
said the
seen.
line, am I really? What did you say, am I really?
I said, am I coming through?
Yeah,
that was my point.
No, except for Kyle, he was the only one that it came through.
No, touch me and see if I'm really here. Or something like that.
Well, see, the other thing, I still didn't figure out for a long time, because when Bob came in, he shook hands with Jerry and said, Jerry, it's like it's the first time he met Jerry.
Right.
And then
I
it was some
pretended.
guy he talked to on the phone and just dropped in. So
Talked to you on the phone? Who did?
I thought it was
The
some
way
guy
you
that he
came
just...
up to me
yeah.
threw Alan off.
So you might have thought it was Bob, but then when I did with Jerry, I said, well, that can't be Bob. He doesn't know Jerry, right?
Yeah,
The
guy met-
best is,
Which I did on
Michael
purpose.
Well, the best is Michael Shields. Which Bob is this?
Did he say that?
Yes.
Is that all on tape?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Did you hear that?
Boy, we beat Nigey actually, because Nigey left. We left 10 minutes blank. This we went right to the end. So this is.
You did 3 tapes with her?
4.5 hours.
How do you get your voice to hold up, Bob?
He fell out one night, and then
man.
for
It fell out
Nigey-
Sunday.
It fell out Sunday, and then for Nigey, he went 7.5 hours.
Oh man.
Wow.
And then I went 3-4 hours with Corbin.
No, 8.5 hours.
Yeah, then I did a whole bunch of hours with Corbin.
Corbin, we got 2-hour video, and that's it. But it was longer.
Yeah.
Well, we got fucking 5 hours of video off this. You want the back of Bob's head and his hands going like this the whole time.
You know what it would have been good too, Bob, is just before you came in the door, if you did wanted to
Oh, yeah.
Right.
walked in, we would
That
have
would
been in
have
shock.
really did it.
If I had done that, that would have been really big.
Yeah, we're big fans of hacks.
You should have made it look
Yeah.
like he was coming over the speakerphone, but really he's over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we tried to plan it out as good as we could.
Yeah, we haven't getting money here at Dobbstown. Limited resources.
We're not so smart when it comes to theatrics. You know.
You did it good. You did good.
Yeah, that was cool.
And yeah, I heard Kyle go, holy shit. Because I was worried someone was going to freak. But Kyle came the closest, but he was under control.
So then you sat down and you were like,
Well, now,
You know,
do
you're
you hear
so
what I
like-
said? I said, well, what movie are we going to?
right. But then you sit down, you pull your pants off, and everybody's just sitting there, dumbfounded, and they're in the corner sort of going,
See, I'm the only one who wasn't dumbfounded there. You know?
I didn't think I was ever going to meet you, Bob. But
Me neither,
I'm
man.
happy
It's
you
like,
came.
I'm glad you accepted my...
I figured when you finally got here, you were just going to sit there, and then we were going to play Bob tapes.
He was going to do something like just hand out pieces of paper and go, there's your quiz.
Lots of material, Jerry. God. You got
No, the
tons of
interesting thing would have
material.
been if you would have handed in blank pieces of paper and said,
That-
"There's your quiz."
That's it. I forgot to say that.
We were going to do that. Hand out blank piece of paper.
And say, this is your quiz.
Yeah.
That's what you said that to me.
Yeah, and then the idea was, well, you'd say, oh, there's no content. Medium is the message.
No, but it was great atmosphere because you were fired up because you really ran through a lot of shit. I mean,
Oh, I brought in a whole new aspect. My plan was to
Yeah.
present the Loosh stuff, which I told you. You asked, why don't you ever talk Loosh? Well, the McLuhan was the only approachable thing. Nobody knows about Roosh. Then there was an interval. You read a little Roosh in the interval. So I came in totally with a different Bob, which fits with I wasn't on the phone. This is personal Bob, or, one-on-one Bob. So I bring in the one-on-one hardware guy, LaRouche. So It was all new LaRouche stuff.
Really, the only living holy office.
Well, Worcester is.
Oh, Worcester.
Yeah. But yeah, is there anybody else? I think that's it.
Could be it.
I don't remember.
Yeah, there's a whole area of
Cosmic awareness.
Oh, yeah.
LaRouche we haven't even got to yet, and that has to do with the stream of consciousness that brings in the Aquarian conspiracy versus the
dead as a CIA plot to zombie
Yeah.
kids.
the Spartan and the Athenian
Yeah.
traditions.
Where are you reading this? You getting New Federalists, or what? Or you
Yeah,
got a
Jerry-
book or two?
Yeah, Jerry finds them for me.
But you got a,
I got the Christian economy and
Good.
common sense.
and you also. Jerry told me that you love my interview, or Bob Marshall's interview with LaRouche.
Yeah.
That is an awesome interview.
It is. Very, very much.
And they give it out as a good interview. To make LaRouche look good, they give that one out.
Oh, they hand it out to
Yeah.
people, yeah.
Or to show,
When
show.
was that?
It was March '89. It was done.
89.
Was this after he was out of jail?
No, he was in jail. He
Yeah, it was
wasn't.
from
He
prison.
wasn't that available before that.
I don't know how Bob Marshall ever got to actually go to the prison cell and do. I mean,
Well, actually,
you had
Oh,
to
hey,
have
no, here's what
you had to have
happened. You know what-
connections with those people.
What?
I mean, LaRouche is not going to grant an interview to just.
No, but here's what
anybody.
happened. He never. I got a chance to interview him, or Bob Marshall did in 1985, and that was when he was running for president. And what they do, they hook in about 10 radio stations across America, and they hooked into Toronto and our station. So Bob Marshall interviewed him, along with everybody, but he only got a question in, 1 or 2 questions. So it was a group interview.
Uh-huh.
That was the only way I ever saw LaRouche, up to that point, allow himself interaction other than doing his TV broadcasts. Then when he went to jail in January '89, he had to sit in this penitentiary detention center before he went to the big place for 5 months. In the 5-month period, he did 234, 240 interviews.
Oh.
It had nothing to do.
Yeah.
So he wanted to keep his prisoner there, so everybody got access to him.
Mm.
And that's how Bob Marshall got him in March '89.
Mm.
So that was easy.
Mm.
And this guy who selected my
But he
interview-
must have been impressed because you'd done your homework.
Yeah.
And you ask him about Bucky Fuller even.
Well, that's what happened. The guy Matt Geis, who you guys got the tape from, I met him in New York a couple years ago, and we just coincidentally found out who we were, and he said, well, I said, how did you get Bob Marshall's interview? And he said, when I was stationed in Washington a few years ago, I said, it was Dana that Bob Marshall went through to get the interview. Dana, whatever her name is. And she was the PR person. He said that when he was stationed in Washington, Dana had to go somewhere else, so he had Dana's job. So he went into a room, a storage room, and there was these piles of interviews, copies from the 230, 40, whatever they had kept of that period. So he started going through a lot of them, and I don't know if he went through all of them, but he heard the Bob Marshall one, and he decided that was the best. So he always gave that out after that. And Bob Marshall had asked me to find out what happened to it. So when I asked him, I said, well, what happened to the interview? Because Bob Marshall wanted to know if you kept a copy. And he said, and so he told me, well, he was the guy who found it. And I said, well, isn't that great? Did I meet the one guy who would answer the question? Because no one else in the Institute would know about it except for Dana, and she's gone somewhere doing something else. So Bob Marshall's lucky that I was the intermediary, because the synchronicity was that I met the only guy who knew.
Mhm.
And so Bob Marshall found out that they did save the interview, and they agreed with him that it was the best, and they presented it as the best. So that was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's slack, synchronicity, serendipity, least principle, least action. Just had to meet one guy, and it was the right guy.
Mm.
That happens all the time. That's how I got to be where I am. All the great holy offices, you had to have luck, you had to have slack to get it all done so fast.
Yeah, the
'Cause
closer you get to the way that the universe works, the more you fall into that.
you spin faster,
Mm.
in that sense. So there's not many people who could cover the range of those 10 holy offices
No.
in one lifetime,
Yeah.
and master them and not get stuck in any one of them.
Hmm.
That's what Club 22 is. Club 22 it's now 14, but it was 22 on the East Coast. It is the 10th position, which includes all. It absorbs all the 9 previous. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Club 22 position is the one that uses all of them.
Mm-hmm. It's not the interval, is it?
It's an interval in the sense it's not any one of them. It's tactile, yeah, because it's using all the senses, in this case 9 senses, so to speak, and not identifying with any one of them, but presenting them in patterns. But that's a satire of what the tetrad managers have to do.
Right.
Eh? But it's presented consciously.
You know all the tetrad managers on the circuit?
Oh yeah, there's not many. They're part of the. See, when I won the Secret Council 10 election in end of February '98, there were.
That was a mock-up you guys did on the radio, right?
No, that was the act. That's how I won. There are 4 candidates.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm trying to remember, who was the guy who hosted the show back then in Canada?
Mike Dyer.
Mike Dyer. Yeah, he gets on the radio and he says, "Okay, everybody, get ready to vote." Right?
Yeah.
So what? Whoever's in the listening audience calls and votes for the.
Yeah. Here's what happened. There are 10 people in Secret Council 10. And that represents. Under them are 4 people each, so to speak. So there's 40. Each member of the Secret Council 10 has a whole bureaucracy under them. Right? So we had 4 candidates. It was me, Prince Charles, Prince Turntaxis, and a guy named Romanoff, who was the excuse me.
He comes in here. Bob, you can stay out there. There's more people to absorb it. Make sure the camera's on him, will you?
Okay.
Yeah, it's on me.
Okay.
What are you doing? Who's going to put all this stuff away?
It's all put away.
Okay. So, and the 4th one was Romanoff, who Scott's holding his nose.
Well, just hold a match to it, that burns it.
Yeah, it burns it off.
You're talking to the star of Flipside, man. That's satanic party.
So there's 4 of us, okay? And we each have our supporters outside the Secret Council 10.
That's like in People magazine when Sharon Stone met Dweezil. They go, "Well, what are you doing with your dad's stuff?" And he goes, "Well, we got tons of shit in the archives, but we ain't gonna put anything out if he's just burping." And we go, "We've got Bob farting, and we're putting a whole album out of Bob just farting."
So Prince Charles thought he had it down, and so did the Gorbachev guy Romanoff, and then me and Taxis. What I did, since it was all secret and within a small group of tetrad managers, I spelled this out in those shows, how I was the only one who understood the homeopathic effect of electricity and all this stuff. So what I did is I went on the air into the electric void, the electric vibration, which we're all part of. We're all there, like we're over the whole planet right now, okay? And I said, I cheated. I said, I put out the phone number for them to call, which would go into the secret computer where the votes were tabulated, right? By me putting out that number, I brought in people who phoned the number, and the computer didn't know they were unregistered Democrat, unregistered, like you got to be registered to vote. So I changed the voting by having the input of these people who phoned in. Do you see what I'm saying? So I won. And so I cheated and I won. And that was in the results were announced the first week of March '88. Now Mike didn't fully understand this. You know what I mean? You're right. You heard that show, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike is saying I just told him what to do.
You got a copy of that one?
Yeah, you can get it from me or Jerry.
Oh wow.
How'd you got copies of some of these old shows?
Yeah.
You've picked some out and got them, eh?
Yeah.
Did you know that was on it, or you just got that one? You didn't ask for that.
Got it.
Yeah. Mike doesn't understand. Mike was a total lackey, I mean, here's Bob Dobbs comes in from the secret Big Brother world and fucking he goes in this little station and starts seeing it's homeopathic, right? You'd never expect the head of the mafia to show up in a little dinky station. He's supposedly trying to take over. Why would he go to the middle of the desert? But Prince Charles and didn't understand the homeopathic effect. Didn't matter where you tapped into the broadcast system, you would affect the whole thing. It's a homeopathic principle. So because I gave out the secret phone number, and because a few people phoned, I only needed a few, because it was all, you know, there's 4 running, and each of us got 10 people backing us up. It's all stalemated, you know. So I went around the whole thing using the electronic environment, the decentralist effect. So inputted the unauthorized people into the computer, and I got the most votes. And as a result, that was in March, first week of March '88 it was announced. And then the X's. Then I was able to start announcing the X's, and then I started playing tapes with the X's. And that would never been done before. So by 1990, here, look what happened. Taxes died in 90. Gorbachev is out in late 91, all right? In 92, Prince Charles goes down. He goes down in June 92 when the biography of Diana came out with her doing suicides and all that. That was 6 weeks after my album came out, thanks to Nelson then, right?
Right.
Or their album, their interpretation of me. And that left me. So Lockdown Bob rule, Turner taxes went down, then Gorbachev's faction went down, the Romanov faction, and then Prince Charles went down and Lockdown Bob rule.
What did each one of those factions represent?
Well, ancient power. They're still functioning. That's why I got to be careful. But, you know, in the long run, I've got the edge. I've disappeared them, but they, you know, from the crowd's point of view, they're still an active force. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you can see their weakness.
Prince Charles, the Aquarian conspiracy.
Yeah.
The he's the
Turn-
Frankfurt. Are they behind
The Frankfurt School is
Aquarian?
the Frankfurt School is the liaison between the Fourth Reich in Germany and the British. It's, you know, it's partly Aquarian conspiracy, but it's postmodernism. It's a wordy version of Aquarianism. It's German sociological tradition, the verbose German or the complicated, constipated German. So that's Croker's gang. You know what I mean? It's difficult literature for people to read.
Yeah.
So you've got the simple British, the complex Germans, and the Frankfurt School is the intermediary between there. And then you've got, I would say Gorbachev is the LaRouche gang. LaRouche, because LaRouche was just awarded a big, you might have seen in the newspaper, he has a big, the Moscow scientists gave LaRouche an award. And once he got out of jail, he went over there. So that's because, you know, LaRouche comes from the Marxist-Leninist tradition. He has a pretty good understanding of the socialist history.
Yeah.
And yet he changed it. So in terms of my book, you know, LaRouche is Gorbachev, Croker is Germany, it's turning taxes, Thompson is Prince Charles, and we're left with McLuhan, and he's an extension of me. He's the Canadian, you know, and he's the guy who understood the homeopathic aspect. So that's why I was in Toronto since '77. So okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense. So on the City Council 10, McLuhan is me, LaRouche is Romanov, Thompson is Prince Charles, and Croker is turning taxes. And that's why in the fifth element in the book is Bob Dobbs on both sides of the page swallowing the previous 4.
Croker in Data Trash, he's concerned with the appropriation of the internet, the commercialization of it, the architecture of it.
Yeah, the 22izing of it, you could say.
Yeah.
By the 14, well, you know, 14, 22, they're interchangeable now. With 14, we really got the staying power. Yeah, the oligarchic, the visual space hijacking of electric space.
And which faction did you just hook him up with, Croker?
Oh, Croker is a German Fourth Reich.
Oh, now why would he be alerting people?
Because he's the German against the British Prince Charles Global Business Network.
Oh.
Right? Yeah. The Germans are, remember, they're the last in Europe to industrialize. They're still into maybe, you know, 1960s, 1950s.
The Germans?
Yeah. They wanted a place in the sun. They actually, you know, according to LaRouche, they had a very good scientific development. See, France was the leader after Napoleon, during Napoleon and after. Then they got tromped on by the Congress of Vienna. Then the scientific spirit moved to Germany. But then that got all